afternoon. Viva Africa, viva. Viva Africa, viva. Long live ECOSOC, long live. Thank you and welcome to the afternoon of day one. My apologies for not being able to join you this morning, but from what I have been able to catch up with from comrades that I've spoken to, I have the assurance that it was a very productive beginning of this Citizens Forum. Our session has been tasked to engage a matter of utmost importance. A lot of what confronts us today boils down to a dysfunctional global governance system. I think a lot of us have been hearing conversations around the paralysis that we are seeing in multilateral institutions and their inability to provide answers to the most pressing questions of the day. And this applies to wars that we are seeing in Sudan. I don't know when you last heard about the war in Sudan and what's happening there. The wars, the conflicts we are seeing in Gaza, in different parts of the world. Just here on the continent, look at the situation in East Africa, in West Africa. You can see where a functional global governance mechanism would have intervened and would have provided solutions to some of the questions that are confronting us today. Another front in which we are seeing this is the front of climate, the climate catastrophe and peril that is before us. Again, the dysfunctionality we are seeing at the level of global governance is leaving the world with no solution. It's 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards, and we are not able to contain the climate peril that confronts us. But it goes beyond that. In this age of artificial intelligence, you desperately need a functional global governance mechanism that arbitrates humanity's interests and creates a common denominator that contains the potential dangers and risks that we are confronted with when it comes to artificial intelligence. But it's going even beyond that. Nuclear risks, we are seeing a complete collapse of the mechanisms that have controlled proliferation of nuclear technology. And the question, the issues go further and further. You can look at debt. More than 28 African countries at a point of debt distress. I am half Kenyan myself, so I can talk about our country, Kenya, where every dollar that is collected, 80 cents is going towards servicing public debt. And you saw how that fueled the rise of even the Gen Z movements. Because what are you left with to deal with the pressing social, economic, and development issues that you need to invest in? So when we talk about global governance, sometimes we think of just the political voice that we say Africa must have and the power dynamic, but it applies on all these other fronts that I've just hedged out: nuclear, AI, climate, finance. And I think our imagination of global governance reform should also think about global financial architecture reform, global security architecture reform, global AI governance reform. It's many fronts that we are challenged to engage with. And I think the proposition that the framers of the session and this conference are putting forward is that a lot of the negative impacts that the continent is experiencing is because of an outdated 1945 UN Charter. And this is a charter that was created with the participation of only 4 African countries. It was Egypt, it was Ethiopia, it was Liberia, it was South Africa. Only one of those 4 could be said to have been an independent country at that particular time. There is a potential point of leverage that I want to mention before we bring in our panel. And this is Article 109 of the UN Charter. It allows for a general conference to review the Charter, and this can be triggered by 2/3 of UN member states, plus any 9 Security Council members. The most beautiful thing about this is that it is a process where the veto that the 5 permanent members of the Security Council hold does not apply. So it's the only constitutional veto-proof mechanism that is there within the UN system. And we're talking of 2/3 of members of the General Assembly and 9 members of the Security Council. It seems attainable that you can trigger Article 109 to fundamentally reform the UN Charter and reform global governance and bring about the kinds of changes that we know will deal with the crisis that we said the current setup is unable to deal with. So we've had technical solutions put forward. Africa has been playing a very important role. We all know of the Eswin Consensus, the SETE Declaration, the Common Africa Position, the Pact for the Future. So I think the question is not necessarily around technical solutions, putting them forward. The key question that we are posing to our panel here and for our engagement as the House is really around our seeming inability to move from these technical solutions to the actual outcomes that we want to see in terms of the global governance reform questions that are before us. So that's the question that I'm posing to you, our esteemed panelists. What do you see as the major obstacles on this path? Of course, we will grant you that space to speak to the problem itself, but I think a lot has been articulated in terms of the problem around global governance. But what are you seeing as obstacles on this journey? But also, what are you seeing as the potential levers and opportunities that we can harness as African citizens and African countries, if we are to broaden it that way, to be able to unlock the potential that is there? And I think it's important for us to know that we are having this conversation a couple of months before the 81st UN General Assembly that will be happening, and a lot of us will be participating in processes there to drive this particular agenda. So to get us going, I would invite Dr. Iyoli Monono, who is the Chair Political Affairs at ECOSOC, to just speak to us, take 5 plus or minus minutes to just speak to us and pose any questions you want to pose, respond to some of the questions that we've put on the table, and then I'll invite the other panelists to come in as well, and after that we'll have time for question, answers, and contributions from the floor. So please give Dr. Iyoli a big hand as he brings in his input.
Thank you very much. We all know this conversation about the UN reform, and not just the UN, but we are talking here about global governance. And global governance comes even when we look at the aspect of financing. When we see that most of African countries rely on the IMF, the World Bank, on loans. And so these conversations are conversations that have gone beyond not just having a permanent seat at the United Nations, but how can we rethink everything about our international governance architecture as a whole? And I will speak a little bit about, maybe also dive in some of the actions that AU ECOSOC have been engaging with other partners to see how we can take this conversation to represent the voices of the African people at the highest level as we push forward for this kind of reforms that we seek. And so when we look at all of these conversations, especially the Citizens Forum, we've seen that in all our Citizens Forum, we've provided a kind of a platform where we can have this conversation to really, first of all, try as much as possible to bring out the voices and the aspiration of the African people. Because first, we have to leverage on our number. Today we're talking with the director of CIDO, and he was looking at the projection of how the African population has to be growing. We are talking about billions. And how can we have such huge market, huge population, huge opportunity, and we don't have any leverage when it comes to, be it the decision-making process? We have conflicts where at a certain time we cannot even decide in terms of how the negotiations and the mediations of these conflicts can come to an end. And how can we develop when we ourselves, we don't have the financial backing in terms of the financial autonomy, in terms of the international financial structure, which is in favor of the continent. And so these are some of the conversations which are very important that we bring to the forefront for us to discuss. I think the question which is there is what opportunity is there for us to leverage on? And the opportunity that is there is, first of all, the coalition, which is not coming only from Africa, but around the world for this reform. And so it is, how do we hang on this international coalition, and how can we make our voices as African citizens also be felt? Because yes, if we look at the African Union, they have a position on it with the 2 permanent seats, but we as citizens, we also have to add our voices to this. And this can also come through us carrying out very informed research, and which shows the importance of African to be part of the table when it comes to the decision-making process. And so we have to talk about awareness, because if we go through this hall to maybe find out about maybe the position of the African Union on the UN reform, and what maybe the AU in terms is doing, most of us will not know. So the first thing we have to, which is an opportunity, is for us to see how to create that awareness amongst ourselves and even to the grassroots, so that people can understand, because sometimes concepts can be misconstrued when people don't understand and people don't know why they are pushing for something, for a cause. And so it is important for us to see how we can take this deeper, and so that the African citizens themselves could have a better understanding. And so, because it benefits us as African, because first it's going to strengthen our voice in the international scene, be it financial, also if it comes to the aspect of even decision-making at the level of the United Nations. And when we talk about reforming global governance, we are talking about everything from AI, that the conversation will move to AI. We are talking about even pandemics. We all saw during the period of COVID-19 where Africa at a certain point was left on its own. And so with the reform is more about trying to see how Africa is going to be at a position of its deciding for itself and not on relying on external forces to decide on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to push you a little bit. Could you share your thoughts? Because you brought in what I believe is an important dimension to this conversation. So if we are thinking about moving beyond technical propositions to building the kind of power, political power that is needed to bring about change. The grassroots mobilization that you mentioned, bringing African citizens, becomes an issue. Can you just share your own assessment of where we are? This is not a new conversation in terms of the citizens' mobilization, or what we need to be doing to be able to bring in that particular aspect. I think we have a sweet spot here where African governments and African citizens are sharing the same common position. I don't know a single African government that is going against what citizens are pushing. But in your view, how do we trigger this aspect of citizens mobilization, citizens movement building, to take it to a critical threshold?
Thank you very much. I believe having such conversation, and I spoke about the aspect of informed research, because one of the few things that we should take is how can we take, one, all of us, most of us belong to grassroots organizations. And so the main idea is how do we take it from this hall to our different countries and making sure that people can know about the importance of this. Because when we see today in Africa, there is a lot which comes with the aspect of misinformation. And as I earlier said, if we don't try as much as possible to communicate rightly, the manner in which it will come out, it might be construed into something else. And that is where we might not have the full support that we want to have for this. So at this point in time, many people don't still, in Africa, I can say, don't still understand, first of all, to keep on pushing for the African position, and also for us to have more voices at every level. We are happy that the diaspora also is part of it. The African diaspora is rising to that, and they can be a good leverage as an opportunity for us to see how we can take this forward.
Okay, please remember what I said at the beginning. 2/3 of members of the General Assembly and 9 permanent members of the Security Council can trigger a veto-proof review of Article 109. I think that should be something that we keep at the back of our mind. I want to invite you, Victoria, to come in. She is the knowledge manager for Include Knowledge platform. Why do you think we are here where we are, and what's your sense of pathways to move forward? Please give Victoria a hand as she shares her thoughts.
Thank you. Maybe I'll start from the premise that I wasn't supposed to be on this panel. I was drafted into this panel against my will. And this is how African countries were drafted onto the United Nations without a choice. Let me take a cue from what you've just said about the possibility of a veto changing everything. The reason it has not been changed is because the intention was never to change it. Let's take it back to the history of the United Nations, as Mr. Biggs had emphasized. When it was established, majority of African countries were still colonized at the time. So when you were drafted into the United Nations, you were drafted by the very powers that colonized you. And here we are making a moral argument for those same powers to allow Africa a seat at the table. I'm not sure if you all see the ridiculousness of that request. I think it was President Olusegun Obasanjo that had admonished young people in Nigeria at some point when he said, power is not given, it is taken. So if you sit here and make a moral argument for how soft power should be used, advocacy, fairness, those kinds of languages, to upturn a system that was built on hard military power, a zero-sum system, then I think we're wasting our time. But Let's go back to the Monrovia, talking of leverages, let's go back to the Monrovia and the Casablanca conversations. And I hope that as Africans, most of us are aware of that history. If Africa would speak with one voice, Africa needs to be financially independent. We have to find a way around it. If you look at the history of the UN's engagement with Africa, the IMF's engagement with Africa, and other multilateral bodies and banks, you would find that things that is sold to us, for instance, structural adjustment programs, where did that end? Or the doctrine of comparative advantage, when we were told that we have the comparative advantage in raw materials. We do not need to manufacture or improve anything in order for us to become developed. China stepped away from that. Where is China today? But as Africans, we have followed a doctrine that was written for us without us. Honestly, when you speak of leverage, the first thing that comes to my mind is that we change the language of engagement. When we say we are reimagining global governance, we come from the assumption that we were part of the people that imagined it in the first place. Were you? If we're honest with ourselves, the answer is no. We should be talking about decolonization. I know a lot of people say, yes, colonization was a long time ago. We shouldn't bother on things like that. But when people say that, they talk from a place of privilege. You can say that because your life has not been tainted by that history. You are either on one of two sides of the coin. The side that was tainted by colonization, or the side that was uplifted, and their development facilitated by colonization. So we should change language. Africa needs some hard power. Every time I think about the Treaty of Palindaba, I get really upset. How do you mean, with all the brilliant heads of states that we have in Africa, historically, geniuses in my opinion, someone sat us down and convinced us that nuclear power isn't something we should pursue? Meanwhile, the only government that has, or state that has the power to veto at the UN level is one that amasses nuclear weapons. So you see, the reason that we are where we are today is because we've allowed other people write our story. There's something that my people say. I'm a Nigala person by tribe from Nigeria. We say, allow the snake come out of its hole in full. Then you can call it a python. Multilateralism, if you were deceiving yourself as to what it was, it has come out of the hole. Countries have taken stock. The snake is out. What we do with it is up to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. You said something that is food for thought. You say Africa needs a hard power. I'm not even going to ask you to elaborate, at least not right now. But it's something for us to really think about. And also because you are coming from a research and knowledge production background, I wonder, because, and you raised the question of, we can't even be talking about reimagining global governance because we were not at the table when, what is there was imagined. And I think it's a point that's worth double tapping on and underlining. Sometimes we think the structures, the institutions, the systems that we deal with today had some kind of divine emergence, or they just appeared. But we are really talking of men and women like us here sitting down. For the Bretton Woods institution, it was sitting down for more than 3 weeks non-stop in a conference. So here, I don't know, we are sitting for about 2.5, 3 days. They sat for 3 weeks, and afterwards, they had crafted what we call the Bretton Woods institutions now, including where they will be based, who would lead, how power will be distributed. So a very deliberate process. The Berlin conference that carved out the continent was also an extremely deliberate process, and it set for almost 4 months non-stop. People were seated in Berlin for 4 months, and afterwards you had a Berlin Conference Act to then say, okay, you take this, you take this, you take this. So I'm just provoking you a little bit to say, when you think about reform, is there, would you think that the approach for us is to actually completely walk backwards to pre-1945, since we're not even there, and stop this tinkering within the box that is probably happening? So add 2 permanent seats, give Africa 2 permanent seats. Like, what's your sense of the scope of the task before us?
Thank you, Briggs. The task before us is enormous, and I would not be disingenuous to sell you a simple story, because just like the physical independence or the active independence that we required at the time when people like Kwame Nkrumah, and the others fought for Africa's independence, required some active and strategic engagement at different levels. Do you require soft power? Yes, because Africa has certain allies that have been saying this for a long time, that things need to change. But what are we doing with the leverage that we have? Our resources. I think Ghana and Nigeria are trying to do something different. We do need to walk back pre-1945. The transition was problematic because we were handed a system that was 100% extractive in nature. Without money, you are nothing. My uncle always says, only a poor man says money is not everything. So if you find yourself in this room saying that, my uncle says you're poor. But that's the thing with African countries. You cannot continue pushing moral arguments for so long. You have the resources. I had a conversation with someone recently, and the person said to me, we view you Africans not as a continent, but as a landmass filled with resources and people that know not what to do with those resources. If you do not go back home with anything today, go back home with that consciousness of how you are perceived as an African, right? So yes, Mr. Briggs, we need to go back pre-1945. What could we have done differently? If we're talking of agency, till date, we are not rolling on Africa's agency. If we're being truthful to ourselves, we are just managing the situation. Like in Nigeria, they will say, we dey do am small, make things no for spoil. So we are taking it gradually so that things do not break down. But guess what? You have been living in an emergency since 1945, in a global emergency where you are the pawn. We need to go back to the drawing board. Economically, security-wise, we need to be strategic. You are nothing without money and security. if we need externals to come and push things within the continent for us to be perceived as governable, then people in the West that are currently having conversations about the recolonization of Africa would be justified. Go back pre-1945 and reimagine from then on, because what we're doing now will not take us anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you. I'm going to move us to our next provocateur. I want to invite Latifa Namutembi. She's the Partnerships and Advocacy Manager at Women's International Peace Center. They work to amplify women's voices, ignite their leadership, and deepen their activism in conflict and post-conflict settings. And if we know anything, more than 25% of the UN Security Council decisions impact the continent, and a lot of them are to do with peace and security. Yet again, we don't have a voice there. So Latifa, speak to us. How are you hearing the conversation, and what would you like to bring into the House?
Thank you. So it's not 25%. It's around approximately 60 to 80% of the Security Council resolutions authorizing sanctions, military enforcement, or peacekeeping mandates, which are focused on the African context. So they spend 60 to 80% talking about Africa. In 2023, it was, I guess, they managed to only do 38.2%. And that was just a council meetings. But 51% of the adopted resolutions were still on Africa. So we are a major topic of discussion in the Security Council. So perhaps we require more than just the 2 permanent seats and the 5 non-permanent seats. What the Security Council needs is Africa. What I mean is that we bring more than a claim of representation. We are bringing our practical experience in how peace is built, maintained, and restored by our elders, combined with women's rights organizations, religious authorities, community dialogue, local ceasefire arrangements, and regional diplomacy. And this experience deserves to shape how international peace and security is understood. So what we are taking to the Security Council that they need is our peace ecosystem that's built on relationships, care, mediation, justice, belonging, participation, economic security, and collective well-being. And these are the conditions that prevent armed conflict, because we know the Security Council only reacts when there is armed conflict. And yet Africa has been managing the violence, the early warning, and dealing with the local conflicts before they become the big armed ones that they respond to. So maybe we need the seats, yes, but they also need us. Yeah, thank you.
I like the dimension that you are bringing. So it's not just a matter of us having democratic representation in terms of having additional seats on the Security Council, or permanent or non-permanent, but you are saying as a continent, we have a lot to give when it comes to our own traditional approaches, indigenous knowledge regarding peace and security, the relational approaches that you have brought about. So it, I guess, elevates the question to the next level then, to say what kind of global governance or UN reform can we imagine, or should we be advocating for, that actually opens up the pathway for Africa to be recognized as holding these assets that you are saying are actually needed by the world in terms of solutions to the current most pressing peace and security challenges. My sense is that it starts to go beyond just asking for these 2 seats that are permanent. Yeah, so what help us understand the broadened scope of global governance reform that will accommodate Africa's knowledge, views, ideas, tradition, culture, at least the upwards aspect of it that the world needs today.
First, I'll say I want us to question whether veto power is compatible with collective security, particularly where mass atrocities and grave violations are concerned. So instead of us saying we should enjoy equal membership, equal rights, and if there is veto, we should also have that, let's flip that table. We don't need that. That goes against the greater good of security itself and peace. But we need to, of course, I don't want to keep saying reaffirm the full implementation of the Ezewini consensus that's been done. That's what we've been saying, I think, for the past. Then if we're saying we should establish an African citizen accountability mechanism for future permanent representation, sort of having an organized way in which, because we are saying Africa should choose, so there should be clear pathways. How do we choose? How do we account? And I think ECOSOC is trying to do something with organizing the citizen through their civil society to deal with the African Union. So it comes from there. Then how do we also influence decisions at that level? And then they need to strengthen conflict prevention, the Security Council, because I know we keep talking about financing for early warning, mediation, women human rights defenders, local peace actors, and implementation of peace, but we are at 0.2% funding, but they spend 60 to 80% of the time talking about Africa. And then we need to create formal pathways for women peace builders and conflict-affected communities to shape the peace itself, to help them understand what actual security and peace means, not to come and testify and tell you, I don't know, those stories that they like to edit and dramatize and make documentaries. No, we want those stories to influence the decisions that prevent that from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you. Please give fair. Thank you. So this is not a conversation about Africans at home. It's a conversation about or for Africans at home and Africans in the diaspora, global Africa, all of us. And in any case, there is not even that division in between. So I'm very excited to bring our fourth and final contribution from the panel. I'd like to invite Ms. Kim Poole. She is a performing artist herself, and she's the executive director of Teaching Art Institute. So please give her a big hand. Teaching Artist
Yes.
Institute. I was trying to say it from my head.
I see sleep people. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. Okay. The most valuable thing we can do as global African people in a world, in this new information age, is pay attention. That is our most valuable asset. And I've heard so many people talk about Article 109 and how it can create space to renegotiate the terms of the UN Charter and to potentially influence other member states to vote in the affirmative of our recognition. But the truth is that our conversation is so much further beyond that now. Representation is no longer what we need. as we reimagine global governance, we need the right to regenerate. Our objective is reparatory justice, even in the space of reimagining global governance. And I've heard several panelists, and this is the ongoing narrative. See, this space is a safe space, and it's about us changing the narrative and also fully understanding the narrative. I represent the historic diaspora. And I can tell you that in 1914, Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, they founded the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And in 1920, global African people gathered in New York City to decide a borderless reparatory future trajectory. And then in 1937, Paul Robeson, an artist after my own heart, he continued on that legacy and created a council of African concern to again assert a borderless reparative future for global Africans in spite of their systems since 1884 at the Berlin Conference, to realign us. And what we realize is that we have never not been a part of the conversation. In 1945, when the United Nations created its charter, 30 years prior to that, global Africans in the diaspora were already using our political imagination to determine what global governance would be to effectively support humanity as the original human beings, as the first. And so when we think about reimagining a new system for global African governance, for global governance, to rebalance humanity with our first mother, Mother Earth, first we have to ensure that we're not recreating the wheel. You see, I sing, I'm a little soul fusion, I'm a little jazz, but what they teach us is that jazz teaches you how improvisation works. But before you can improvise, is that the word? Improvise, thank you for that. The English language is my enemy. Yes, they stole my language too. Before you can improvise, you need to know the chord progression, the circle of fourths and fifths, so that when you're on stage and you're in the moment and you're channeling your ancestral wisdom and you're tapping into the divine, into the metaphysical, a world you can't see, you already know the notes. So it doesn't matter where you pull from because it's in you. And so when we forsake our history and we start the conversation at 1945 and we reimagine global governance for Africa and a world in transition without seeing the efforts of borderless reparatory African trajectories and political imagination that have already set the standard for us, Declaration for Negro Peoples of the World, Marcus Garvey, Paul Robeson, Council of African Affairs, then we have already gone astray and we've been culturally derailed. For us in the Teaching Artists Institute, we've already begun doing our homework, not only holding up our predecessors of recent history in the 21st century, in the 20th century, but also what we call our ancient future. See, we're going back to Ma'at and the 42 laws of Ma'at. We're looking at Mbongi out of Congo and what it means to have public discourse and those indigenous, Afro-indigenous forms of governance. We're looking even right here in Ethiopia at the Gada system that is highly contested in some rooms and conversations, but it is at least a cooperative governance system of our own design and development that we can still reach out and touch right here in the capital of Africa, in Addis Ababa. And so the question becomes, as we are reimagining global governance, even in this room, who is at the table? Our young people are still in the back of the room. I've heard so many elders say, take a seat up front. That was not a request. That was, come and sit yourself here in your place in history now. Come and change this conversation in the moment. In the African worldview, there is no such thing as the future. The past is present. The future is now. We are reimagining. And I love what the Bible said about including the diaspora voice and acknowledging that as a part of the conversation. So I want my sister, she's from Baltimore, stand up, Tamako Shine. Go ahead and stand up so the people clap for her. You have to understand, And Raj, I want to thank you again for acknowledging the voice of the diaspora. For 11 years, I remember when ECOSOC as an institution was an idea because my ancestors and my elders told me about this organ that was going to assert the African diaspora voice to help member states understand the concerns of a borderless reparatory future. I remember when they moved their office from Addis into Lusaka, Zambia in 2016, and we were there to see some of those that are in leadership now that are big bosses now. I remember when they were just a part of the cluster working groups, and now they've continued. And so when I think about the trajectory that we're on and what we're reimagining, it's important to know that we're already in the process. Yes, Article 109, invoking Article 109 is important, but we also need to use our power. And our power is soft, and that is hard. Disengagement. That is our power. We no longer have to pay attention to those that don't accept our demands. We have done everything to engage in their assemblies. We have taken our experiences and legitimized them with their commissions and their international platforms. We have followed all the rules, and we've done it with flying colors. Now, in this year, 2026, we decided that we would go down to Colombia with the Vice President Francia Marquez and CELAC, the community of Caribbean and Latin American countries, would convene the largest platform in the world, over 2 billion in representation. And for the first time, the African Union came to meet with them to start talking about what does global South-to-South cooperation and solidarity look like. Sure, a few of us can continue to play that game. We're not against global or international cooperation. We'll continue to go to the United Nations. But the rest of us need to focus on what it means for us to cooperate. And that is the cooperative repair that we owe ourselves. That is the reparation that we owe ourselves. And we must never forget that these systems weren't built in a vacuum. We're not at the table because it was a fair system that just so happened to historically exclude us. We were excluded with intention. And so as we go and engage in these places, we have to remember that the purpose is always reparatory justice. But for us, the 5 forms that the United Nations identified, restitution, compensation, satisfaction, like apology, guarantees of non-repetition, rehabilitation, this is no longer enough. What we want is regeneration. And that is the reparation we owe ourselves. And we have the capacity for that. And it's happening right now here today.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you very much for the passion, for the energy. I got a signal that we have slightly under 10 minutes to go. So I would like to create space for some voices to come in. If time allows, I'll then invite the panel to just give a closing parting shot in a matter of seconds. We are trying to look at how do we move this conversation forward. And I think from what you're saying, Kim, what it brings home to me is that it's a spectrum of responses before us. Some of them are soft, and so it's a spectrum that runs from soft to hard, and maybe to very hard. So what is that spectrum? Yeah, there's a lot we can share, but let me invite, I'm seeing a hand there. Do we have someone who can move the microphone a little bit so that we gauge the temperature in the room and hear what colleagues, comrades are holding? Please try and brief, and if you have insights on how we can take this forward, would really welcome that. Quickly introduce yourself and your point.
My name is Ernest Dolo. I'm from the African Union Commission, from SIDO, precisely. And I wish to say thank you to all our colleagues who have intervened. The only place I feel that I belong to a diversified group or different pockets of group is within Africa itself. Once I board the jet to go any part of the world, I am called an African. It is surprising that when we come to motherland Africa, we become different groups. until we start to speak with our oneness, including our voices, including our body, including the very embodiment of what we call Africa, we will continue to have a long way to go. Among the names you say Marcus Garvey, and the rest, I add George Padmore. And George Padmore, within the context of the 5th Pan-African Congress that took place in October, in England in October 1945. Among those participants were our fathers like Kenyatta, were our fathers like Kwame Nkrumah. It is after that talk in the UK that they became presidents of countries in Africa. And when they were presidents, we call them our founding fathers, which is the fact. They spoke with one voice. Things moved. My sister Victoria spoke about the Monrovia group, the Casablanca group. How did that tension come to pass? It was inhibited by the wisdom of our father called Emperor Haile Selassie. That is what you call oneness. Until we speak without oneness, we will have a long way to go. We are like chasing an asteroid, which is the fastest moving element of the galaxy, that we say, yes, we will sit in a Boeing to go and chase an asteroid. We cannot. We are dealing with a group of people who think very fast, who are very fast in everything they do. We should move also fast if we should collect the wagon at a certain time of the journey. Thank you very much.
Microphone to the, yeah, keep passing the microphone back there.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the panelists for the presentation. I am Doreen Bang, coming from Cameroon, the founder of Teen Alive organization. I just wish to queue up with the last speaker and what the panelist says, that until we are able to address the root causes of everything, Africa will remain where they are. Like one of the panelists mentioned, it is evident that Africa has refused to reject the colonial mentality. Just like it was mentioned, China was in the same situation, just like most of Asia, but today they are developing, and we are here fighting conflicts all over the country. And where I come from, the ongoing crisis is because of foreign languages, where the Anglophones are fighting that their language is being dominated. What about our traditional and original languages? Where we come from, we have a tradition, we have a culture, we had a way of life, but during colonial rule, we gripped everything and we have hung on to them, and we are not ready to let go. Until we are ready to let go, we'll continue, and maybe next time we'll come and sit here and still debate on this, yet we'll not move an inch. Thank you.
Yeah, please pass right next to her. There was a hand there. If not, keep moving. Yeah, to the middle.
Thank you to our panelists. My name is Paulina Gesa. I come from Kenya, Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. And this is a question maybe to the panelists. This continent continues to face overlapping conflicts and state fragility, and even with the AU Peace and Security Council's early warning systems in place, we still continue to face humanitarian crises, and they seem not to go away. So what is a reformed UN Security Council bringing to the table, or how is it going to solve such localized issues that actually turn out to be very big issues for countries and the continent?
Thank you. There's a hand. Next table, then we'll come to you. Somewhere there, yeah? Okay, then we'll go to...
Okay, nice to meet you, all of the concerning bodies. I would like to apologize also on the panelists, especially three ladies. I will say thank you for your expressing more what we are eager to in our deepest since Africa's problems, we know our problems, and also we have a solution. But our problem is to be implemented, the implementation problem. So we can't implement our solution. Why we are go through the other system. The line of system is not concerning us. So we should have to change the system. We have to return back before colonization, who we are. Do you know your fathers before that? If you know your father before that, you will be returned back. And also colonization is not only land colonization as right before our brothers and sisters. It's mental colonization. It is very dangerous mental colonization. You are controlled by remote mental colonization. So there is no contact each other by physically, but you controlled by system. The solution is being yourself. Being yourself. When you are being yourself, you should have to retain your individual interests and come back together within common interests. And nations, those who have common interests will be reach on their goal. Unless and otherwise, we are talking. What's wrong?
Thank you.
Thank you, kid. Thank you.
Thank you for, the next table. Then we start to move. I'll take, let's say, four more hands.
Okay, thank you, Moderator Briggsbaum, Mr. Briggsbaum. Thank you for the panelists for the presentation about Africa We Want and the ECOSOC so Citizens Want Summit. And I'm glad to see you, and I'm happy to hear that. But I'm not going to point it on no one, but we have a collaboration with multilateral organizations. There is a lot of opportunity because the youth have grown, and they want to see a better future, because if you go to Africa Union Security Council, everything is on hand. Africa Union Council can anything you can do, because to stabilize, to Africa to better for the future generation is possible to implement everything what they want, because Africa have on hand, everything is on hand. And the other ones, we have to work with multilateral organizations like UN and better, because everything is coming for the better, because we want to speak in this step on in this summit about a better future, because the dogma for the Africa we want on the about this this dogma about better future Africa we want, and that's a good cool condition. Then I have proposed to give indicator about to pure relationship with African country. They have on our hand on our Africa Union, because there is no nothing to intervene, because we know each other, we every culture. The other where I want to speak about extincting the language. Extending the language will be extinct and coming to extinct, like many countries. Then we have to propose and work with UNESCO. And that's a good
Thank you. If
plan
you can
for.
wind down,
Thank you very much, moderator and panelists.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. Please come to the front. Then I'll take a few more hands. Just let's bring the microphone here.
Thank you. I just want to back on a suggestion that has been thrown to the House, that we need to go back to 1945. I just have this question. do we have a roadmap of how it will look like, or what it will look like to go back? What architecture would we be going back to? Or would we sit down and say, yes, we agree, we are going back, and then in the process of going back, we disagree on how are we actually going back? How does that look like? Do we have any idea of how that will look like? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Please bring to the front table here. And remember to quickly introduce yourself.
My name is Dr. Kwabna Obriebwa, board chairman of Code for Africa, one of the African diaspora organizations in Germany. Listening to all those who have spoken so far, what I'm thinking about is kind of divided house stand. So how can we leverage the experiences of both the diaspora and the energy of ECOSOC to help put our house in order? And I believe when our house is in order, we can aggressively demand what we want and it will be given to us. Because when the house is not in order and we demand and we put one country at the top, is the country going to represent our interest or whose interest? That is what I'm just pondering over as I listen to all the other panelists here and all the other people who have also spoken to the topic. Should we put our house in order, become a very strong household, then we aggressively ask for the demands, or we can do them both? And I think ECOSOC is also involving the diaspora, which is very good because the diaspora is in different positions and can influence or have an influence on certain policy decisions that are taken externally. So this is my little submission. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to circle back to your thoughts as I invite the panel. There's something I'd like to bring in there. So just two names at the back, then we close. Two names. It's good to see the passion to contribute, but time is our enemy, one of our enemies.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Thomas Jamal. I came from Addis Ababa University, which is a PhD candidate. I like to appreciate each and every conversation or any forwarding points from the podium to the guests or any participants. My point is, if we get a lesson from those freedom fighters like Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Nelson Obote, those, they have a good mentality how to stand in front of any challenges and any issues that came from that imposed on their mentality issues. So we have to go back and understand what are the motives and the mentality those freedom fighters they have. Also, our Emperor, His Excellency Haile Selassie, before 1945, during the League of Nations, they stood in front of those Western organization by representing all Africans as a Pan-Africanist. So we should have to go back and get a lesson from those freedom fighters. And during the disintegration of the Casablanca and the Monrovia Agreement, our foreign affairs during that time, Katama Yefru and Sokoto Ture, they try to make some integration and they preserve the AU, underquote, the AU. But my point is, we have to go there and understand, learn, get a lesson from the previous freedom fighters. What are their mentality? So we'll tackle any issues then, because we are a cradle of human being. The other point that I want to raise is, currently, most Africans, they are free from the colonization, but the remaining issue now, after the Gen Z and the millennia, Westernization issue is now colonizing each and every mentality of African countries.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's take the final hand at the back. Female voice.
Thank you.
No, I said at the back there. Where are you? Okay, now let's hear that voice and then I'll sing a hand right at the back. I think I saw a sister raising a hand back there.
My name is Brooke Mkulu and I am from Addis Ababa University, student of IR. The insights, the things that were raised were very insightful. That you mentioned that it is unrealistic to expect the same colonial powers that designed the current system to voluntarily give up their privilege, and I understand that perspective. But however, even the external powers resist these reforms. Africa also faces internal divisions. We often say that Africa should speak with one voice, yet the member states frequently pursue different national interests and external partnerships. So in your view, what is the biggest obstacle to achieving genuine African unity to global governance, and what practical institutional reform within the African Union could help overcome it? Thank you.
Thank you. Then the last voice back there, right, yeah.
Hello to the panel. My name is Kamani Samuel, representing Niggas Kingdom. And as the panelist was also talking about decolonizing Africa, I think it's really important for us to focus on what is the original way of African governance. Africans used to have kings, queens. Now we have adopted republics, democrats that come from the European form of governments. And this is also part of biblical prophecy, is returning the King of Kings, which Ethiopia is a part of. Its history is a part of. And this is a part of the power that Africa needs to bring back. This is what will, remove the European powers from having, influence on how we govern ourselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's a brilliant point to land this. Let's give a hand to all the sentiments coming from the house. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's really a question of us thinking boldly, given where we are. So at this stage, I don't think any idea is crazy or out of the realm of what we need to be considering and engaging with. The assumptions that have underpinned even those ideas that we adopted from other cultures, other civilizations, they've all collapsed. So it's really a moment where there's this collapse, and within that collapse, or inside that collapse, is an opportunity for us to be really bold in putting forward propositions about our own sense, wisdom, insights on what works as governance at a national level, community level, and at a global level. So I really welcome some of the ideas that we are hearing, including the very last contribution that came from the floor. I think it challenges us to think way beyond or way outside of the box, and this is the moment for us to be bringing that. I also wanted to double tap on this question of putting our house in order, or the question of African unity, African integration. I think someone was saying recently, India has about 1.5 billion people and they have one US ambassador. China has more or less the same number of people. They also have one US ambassador. Africa, with about the same number of people, has close to 50 US ambassadors. And those numbers should tell you something in terms of how fragmented we are, even in terms of when it comes to our engagement with the global powers that are responsible for the current dispensation that is there. So there's something to be said about getting our house in order at a national level so that again our hands are cleaner and we are showing up at the continental level with legitimacy from our citizens in terms of strong and national level governance, but also at the continental level. Right now, the question of Pan-African unity, Pan-African leadership cannot be overemphasized. We are seeing a glaring lack of leadership in that direction, and we need to be, encouraging, pushing, shoving, lighting some fires under the current leaders to prioritize, pay a lot more attention, invest more resources in engendering this Pan-African unity, Pan-African leadership, Pan-African integration, because it is an anomaly that we can go out there seeking better global governance when we have not put our house in order at that level. And I think that extends also to how we are functionalizing, operationalizing the unity of Africans at home and Africans in the diaspora. At a very operational and functional level, how are we being deliberate and what are we putting, how are we imagining that? Because some of these things are within the realm of our power to do tomorrow. It doesn't require, all these other processes to get there. So that's the first thing that I wanted to offer from what I'm hearing. Then the second and last is really, I would encourage ECOSOC and others who are here to think more of a campaign approach on this issue. I deliberately threw in those statistics at the beginning in terms of what you need to trigger Article 109. I think we are all agreed that that is one of the fronts that is open, one of the points of leverage that is open. Getting 2/3 of the General Assembly means securing the support of 129 countries out of the 193 members of the General Assembly. For the Ghana-led resolution on reparations, we had, I think, 123, 124 countries supporting that. So it's not, again, something that is, if there is a systematic, deliberate campaign effort, we should be showing up in this meeting knowing that 50 countries support this agenda. Then we knew that last year or 3 years before it was 20 countries. Then we can see the progression that we are making, and we can also identify those countries that are holdouts, and we can have strategies of how to engage them, whether it's soft power, hard power, until we can deny them our minerals, Victoria, if that's part of the hard power, right? Until you support this, and then it can take us to the 129 countries. So I am motivating for a more campaign approach where you can be that's how you can then bring in your labor, your students. It's something that is concrete that they can drive around. For the Security Council, we said it's 9 members out of the 15. And again, that's feasible because even if all 5 permanent members decide not to support, which is unlikely because we've been seeing at least China, Russia supporting the agenda for global governance reform, including the agenda of bringing, giving permanent seats to Africa. So you can actually already have some of those permanent members being part of the 9 that you need. So this is a very feasible campaign in my view. Kim, I really liked the concept around borderless reparatory future. And I think it speaks again to this imperative for getting our house in order, because I think that has to be the starting point, us getting our house in order, turning ourselves into this powerhouse. So if you see some of the things that are happening between us and the diaspora or within the continent, they start to disappoint you on a different level, because the question of a borderless Africa right now that centers this reparative justice agenda has never been more urgent, but also the historic opportunity to drive it, I think, has never been more significant. With that, I'm not going to be coming back here. I'm just inviting, it's really a matter of seconds, your parting shots, what you want us to be thinking about before we meet again next year. And let me start with you, Kim, and then come to Dr. Ayoli, and then come to Latifa, then I'll close with you, Victoria. It's a matter of seconds, less than a minute.
So I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. Come on, y'all, to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. On my parting short, I want to remind us that how we conference is a part of the repair. How we connect. When we have up here the high table and down there the low people, these are all cultural norms, and we need to begin to embed in the pedagogy of how we connect as a part of the solutions, the reparation we owe ourselves. I also sing that because you are not smarter than a fifth grader. I want to see 10-year-olds. We start this conversation with our young people shaping the future they will inherit way too late. I want them to be given report cards to global leaders in their countries and to our borderless reparatory future. So remember the young people in real time.
Thank you, Kim. Let's go to Dr. Riali. Yeah.
Thank you very much. At this time, I believe from our conversation, the reparative agenda, which is now a decade that the African Union is putting for this conversation, is a unique opportunity for us not just to reimagine, but to reconstruct. Because when we see today the discourse, we see that there are some countries that are trying to realign. And if you go to these countries, if we are not careful in terms of our communication, in terms of making people to understand what we are pushing for, they will be tagged just like how Patrice Lumumba was tagged as a communist. And that we see today. We see people like Thomas Sankara that are coming up. But we see other voices that are also coming to say, you should not realign because by leaving us is by joining the others. We are not leaving one side to join the other as we join them without our consent. But if we want to join or we want to realign our negotiations, we should come from a very strong position. And this can only be if we can have our African Monetary Fund, if we can have our African Central Bank, if we can have free movement, if we can have free market. I think we'll be in a very stronger position when we are realigning. Thank you.
Thank you. We are doing better on time. A big hand. Latifa. Parting shot.
Yes, so I don't know about other countries, but Uganda, 1945 is at least 45 years late. Our social order was, I was about to say a bad word, messed up, at least officially in 1900. So maybe that's where we begin from with the Uganda Agreement and find our way. But in everything that we do as Africans, convene everything, we need to give Africans grace. Because we were colonized, we were chained, beaten, raped, murdered, mutilated, taken on ships. Even now we have invisible chains. So many things are happening to us. So in between trying to survive and then trying to participate in a global order, maybe, I think Kim said disengage. Maybe we need to close our continent and just be Africans for a while and take a break. So I don't know how we ask for a break from the global community. We just be like, let's take a break, maybe. Give us 100 years. We shall reconnect. I don't know.
Radical. 100 years of a break with those global spaces. Victoria.
It's a big problem.
Let's lend us.
Yes. How many of us want peace in Africa? By show of hands. How many of us want development in Africa by show of hands? Good. You see, we are not that different. We are told that we are different when it is convenient for the West, and we are told that we are the same when they want to negotiate with us for their own convenience. That's one. Secondly, while I would love to disengage, you cannot disengage from a system that determines your destiny. Bear that in mind. You have to be strategic. Lastly, we have to strengthen the African Union. If it means we send out offering and collection bowls to contribute money to make the AU independent, by all means. Finally, the Africa that we inherited, or the global order that we inherited, was negotiated in our absence. Posterity would not judge us fairly if our children inherit the same order. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. We'll wrap it up here. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we are real out of time, so we will start to transition, but let's take a photo of the panel. Please give them another big hand. I think this was a very wonderful session, yeah.
While they're taking the photo, in the words of Dr. Mukundi, another pom-pom for our panelists. Louder. They didn't do a good enough job. Thank you. I think we've had a fantastic morning and afternoon. And just to re-energize us, I would like to invite my colleague, Eric Ngala, to give us an energizer before we move into the next session. Eric, please join me.
Good afternoon. Why are you guys looking so energized? Good afternoon. Good. I've been asked to sing. Can you believe? Now, look at who is celebrating. I only know how to sing in the bathroom. And yes, when I'm sharing that no one is hearing, I'm just alone. Actually, when I sing, I don't sing loud at all, so that no one can judge me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a good afternoon. Lunch was served. Digestion is happening. True or not true? In Africa, we love stories. And there is one thing, if you are not a Gen Z, then you are a father of a Gen Z or a grandfather of a Gen Z, right? So there is something they call rock, paper, scissors. How many of you know it? Victoria, you know it? Aha. Now, could we please stand up? I want us to be babies, Gen Zs, for a moment. Then I'll tell you an African story. So please get a partner. We want to make it quick. Get a partner, someone you can easily beat in the game. Just scan around the room. Someone you can easily beat in the game. Aha. William has run away. Ambassador William has run away to Carol. He knows the person to beat. Okay. Aha. Okay. Please get the instruction right so that you can win. I've been informed that the person who is going to win will have the 4 o'clock coffee for free. You will not pay. Okay? It's been paid for by Ambassador William, okay? Let's try. Rock, paper, scissors. How is it done? And then there's a scissor, there's a rock, and there's a paper, right? Ernest is completely lost. It's not a prayer. You are praying. It's not a prayer. Aha. Now, if you don't know, so how do we do it? Rock crushing papers then. And then the scissor also cutting. So if you are cut, you've lost. If you show a scissor and there's a paper, then you've lost. And the rock, how do I do it? Please come. I have the two of you, please. You know, I have a mic, I'm a man, I can't multitask. This thing is not, we don't have a stand. So these are my co-facilitators. They're going to help me. So we want to do rock, paper, scissor, okay? Please demonstrate to them how you are going to do rock, paper, scissor. Rock, paper, scissor, okay? Repeat. We have Gen Zs who are, they've already got it. The grandfathers haven't, yes? Good. Rock, paper, scissor. We are together. Okay. Please face your competitor. Wait.
Trigger word. It's rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Yes. Okay, please listen. I didn't say we converse. I'm just asking us to face our. Don't get excited. When you're losing is when you're going to get excited, all right? Okay, there's a trial. Rock, paper, scissor, shoot, right? When I say rock, paper, scissor, shoot, that's when you show your sign, right? Your strategy. Listen to me. Listen to instructions. You people are excited. Listen to instructions. Now, if I see you talking and laughing like Carol Gilombo, you've lost. Do you guys want me to earn my salary here? Listen to me. Hello? Why are we getting excited? Do you want me to earn my salary? Okay, thank you for listening. All right, let's go. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. That's a trial, right? Because I can see the presiding officer has lost twice in the trial. All right? A quick one. We're only doing twice. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Please note, that's the first one. The second one. And then the winners and the losers are declared like Spain and Argentina. Okay? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. So, just wait. Don't sit down. Don't sit down. Don't sit down yet. Don't sit down yet. In Africa, we tell stories. And I want to tell you a story. Where is your left? Where is your left? Left hand? Right hand? Left leg? Right leg? Good. So when you hear in my story right, you move to the right. Your right is the other left, as I said in the morning. When you hear right, you move to the right. When you hear left, move to the. For those who are not married, please note, this is friendly. Is right or left? And if you have a husband who is called Mr. Right, then you are Mrs. Right. Okay? So a story is told of Mr. and Mrs. Right. We call them rights. Yeah. Someone is already lost. My goodness, I left my specs. So, once upon a time, listen to the story. Please get space and don't cause an accident. Once upon a time, Mr. Right. I just mentioned right is your other left. So if you are left-handed and you think with the left brain, please just know that right is the other left. Okay. So once upon a time, Mr. Right woke up early on a Saturday morning. He looked over at Mrs. Right. Hey, some people are not moving at all. They are like, whatever it is, let it be. Exactly. So looked over at Mrs. Right, who was still fast asleep on the left side of the bed. Mr. Right got right out of bed and walked right down the stairs to the kitchen. He realized he had left the coffee pot on the counter the night before. That's not right, muttered Mrs. Right. He searched high and low for the coffee beans, but there were none left. So he walked right over to the pantry on the left. Now we know who has left and right. People are just, some guys are staring, whatever it is. My story is not over because my grandmother told me stories before, so I enjoy storytelling. Suddenly, Mrs. Right walked right into the kitchen. "Good morning, Mr. Right," she said. "Did you leave any coffee for me, or is there none left?" "There is no coffee left at all," replied Mr. Right. "I'm heading right down to the grocery store right now. Do you need anything left on your shopping list?" That's the question. Mrs. Right thought for a moment. "Yes, please, buy some milk. It's right on the top shelf, and don't forget the bread left near the bakery aisle. Take the car keys. I left them right by the front door." Mr. Right grabbed the keys, walked right out of the front door, and turned left towards the garage. But halfway there, he stopped right in his tracks. He had left his wallet right on the kitchen table. He turned right, around, went left, back into the house, and bumped right into Mrs. Right. Mr. Right shouted, "Mrs. Right, you nearly knocked me right over." "I am sorry, Mrs. Right," said Mr. Right. "I left my wallet right here." He grabbed his wallet. Now, this is the adult content. Kissed Mrs. Right on the cheek and said, "All right, I am leaving right now." And off Mr. Right went, turning left, then right, then left, again, leaving Mrs. Right standing right and where he had left her. Ladies and gentlemen, we have done our bit. I earn my pay. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the extraordinary Eric Ngala. Now that we are all wide awake, distinguished participants, we can now move to panel 2, titled Climate Action and a Just Energy Transition. So this session will bring together leading voices from across the continent to explore Africa's climate priorities, including strengthening our collective engagement in global climate negotiations and advancing a just and inclusive energy transition. So we're pleased to welcome our distinguished speakers. So as I call your name, please make your way to the stage. So for this session, we have Dr. Nana Antwi, Boasiako Amwa, the representative of the African Group of Negotiators on Climate Change for the period of 2026 to 2027. Also inviting Mr. Vinesh Chintaram, the Chair for Infrastructure and Energy for the ECOSOC General Assembly. And lastly, Dr. Tinashe Gombo, Program Executive Ecological Justice from the All Africa Conference of Churches. So, and moderating this session is Ms. Victoria Mania, our knowledge manager at Include Knowledge Platform, hosted by the African Studies Center, Leiden. So please join me in welcoming our panelist and moderator to the stage. Victoria.
Oh my God. Thank you. Okay, hello again. If you don't respond to me, I'll call the man back and you go left and right. Hello again. Good. Before we delve or dive into the panel, Vinesh has a small presentation to just lay proper foundation before the questions start rolling in. Vinesh, over to you.
Well, I hope you're all awake. May I speak in French? No response. Just raise your hands, the francophones in the room. Not too many. All right, I have less than 10 minutes. So anyways, I take you through that scene setting. Right, we are talking about Africa's just energy transition. What does that mean, basically? So, do you think Africa needs a transition? Do you think Africa needs a transition? Yes? Well, basically, Africa is not really transitioning. We have a big problem. We have an issue of energy deficit. You transition when you already have the energy which you're using massively. Then you transition from fossil fuel to green energy. But when you don't have it, how do you transition? Next, 600 million Africans do not have access to electricity. It's half the continent. Actually, it's even more. It's 2 over 5 Africans we do not have access to electricity. So basically, if we are talking about transition, how do you transition half of the continent to have that access? If you look at this table, and it's a bit unfortunate you won't see what's the last line, Africa consumption per capita. I'm not going to the figures in details, but just to mention it, it's less than 500 kilowatt hour per African. That is a figure which dates back like 2-3 years ago. The world, it's 3,000 kilowatt hour. Northern America, it's nearly 13,000 kilowatt hour. What does that mean? Africa has access to energy today as compared to the rest of the world. The average, it's 7 times less for 1.2 billion people. Just imagine what I'm saying. If you compare it to Europe, it's 12 times less. And if you just shift it to America, okay, North America, we're talking about 26 times less. Try to understand where we're standing today in terms of deficit. And yet we speak about just transition. Do you think that term just is justified? Question for you. Now, more than 1 billion Africans do not have access to clean energy for cooking, meaning for their food. We were sitting like 2 hours ago, we had a nice meal. It's not the case across the continent, I mean, all across the continent. And have you ever heard about energy poverty? How many amongst you ever heard about energy poverty? Anyone? No one. But you've heard about poverty, right? Do you think Africa is poor when it comes to energy? Please give me answers. Yes or no? In some part. Well, we have energy poverty in Africa, which impacts health, which impacts women and their opportunities, their time, which impacts education and the quality of education, water access. AU Theme of the Year is about water access and sanitation. Well, it is also energy link. And that's all the problems we are facing. And one more I want to add. Digital services, it was mentioned a bit earlier in the morning sessions when we were talking about AI, digital infrastructure, etc. When you don't have energy, when you have an energy poverty, when you have an energy deficit, why are we talking about digital infrastructure? We are transitioning from where to where is a question. Well, we can still have a roadmap till we achieve our Agenda 2063. Well, again, I'm not going to the details, but it's worth understanding what has been happening over the past decades when it comes to COP, what kind of negotiations were led, what claim we had for the continent, where we stand today, and what we're going to do at least for the next 10 years. So to summarize, just transition, at least it is a definition from my perspective. It should include decarbonization. It should also include accessibility to energy, to industrialization, to climate resilience, to African value creation, and of course to social equality, or I would even say equity. So to conclude, we have three main frameworks, I believe, we could address that situation room that we're talking about for the forthcoming COP. So what is negotiation intelligence? What is the African reality? And what finance and delivery we want to really take forward? Again, there are a few little points which are outlined there. I'll leave it to you to read it. I'm not going to the details of that. But what is important is one window shows what happens inside the negotiations, and one window shows what happens across our territory. There are two different windows here. And one shows whether promises are kept. That's the reason why I said, have we ever been asking ourselves the questions of what has been happening for at least the past 10 COPs? And where are we heading to for the next 10 ones to come? In any case, establish an AU-led African climate situation and delivery platform before that COP31, integrating negotiations intelligence, African territorial evidence, climate finance tracking, infrastructure projects pipeline, and structured civil society participation is fundamental. And the question that we have been asking ourselves since this morning about the citizens' voice and the role of ECOSOC, we will have the time to elaborate a bit more on that. But we have today a platform at our disposal that we really need to make utmost use of it to push our voice beyond these walls. And we need to make those voices to be heard as well. But that's the challenge, because even here, when we ask our fellow, I would say, participants to voice out, very few are able to voice out. So when we are given that opportunity, we need to seize that opportunity. So basically, in terms of scene setting, and we will elaborate more, I've heard many saying we need to speak as one. We need to clean up our house, okay? we also need to be evidence-based, because we can't just speak openly without having solid evidence of where we want to head to. But at least we need to know where we're standing once again. And that's what will help us to truly have what we would call an Africa that see together, that can negotiate together, and that can hold delivery to account together. On these notes, I wish to thank you. And Victoria, we await your powerful questions. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for. Thank you so much for that, for articulating the issues as you have on a very high level. We will go a bit deeper into the issues as the niche expects, but today I want to start with a story that speaks to something Vinesh has just alluded to, which is the analytical disadvantage that our negotiators who painstakingly prepare for negotiations at COP31, or sorry, at COP, always encounter. This was in, I think 2 years ago, COP29. The African negotiators and other developing countries had aligned on an amount that would be helpful. And I'll break it down, I wouldn't be too technical, so that those who are not familiar with the diction and nomenclatures within this space would understand. So there's something called the Paris Agreement. And an amount was agreed on the contributions that should come to African countries in order to deliver on the Paris Agreement. And this was $1.3 trillion. However, once this position was agreed upon, a night before the conclusion of the negotiations, the COP presidency in that year called a few countries into the room, and they adjusted the amount from 1.3 trillion to about 350 or 300 billion. Nana, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Now, African countries were not called into this second meeting. They were only, invited to listen to what the developed nations, including India, China, Brazil, and a few other countries had decided. In fact, I'm not sure how many of us watched the walkout. So some countries staged a walkout of that negotiation. But this is what we speak about, that 12 of the most vulnerable, climate vulnerable countries in the world are, and there are 20 of them, 12 of them are in Africa. Our negotiators try as much as possible to be prepared for these rooms, for these negotiations at COP, in order to come out with a favorable outcome for African nations. But year in, year out, we come out with that disappointing headline. COP29, COP30. Now we're moving to COP31. And as Vinesh has rightly put it, we're working together with the African Group of Negotiators, with the ECOWAS, with the AU, ECOSOC, to see how we can come up with an intelligence platform that helps and provides that real-time intelligence to our negotiators so that they are not just manually ready, they are tech ready as well, because most of the countries in the West have deep infrastructure to aid these negotiations. Now, let me start with someone who, Dr. Tinashe, you work with congregations and communities that feel the brunt of the climate degradation that's happening, right? You also collect data in real time from the ground up. I wonder, to what extent is there a communication pathway from those communities and congregants to our negotiators when they go to COP?
Okay, thank you, Victoria. Yeah, my name is Tinashe Gumbo, representing All Africa Conference of Churches. But for the sake of answering this particular question, I want you to associate me more with a network coordinated by AACC, which is called the Africa Faith Actors Network for Climate Justice, represented here also under the AACC. So this network is present in 43 countries. It's an interfaith network. It's a network which collaborates with the broader civil society, the academia, and also the governments in the different countries. And I'm elaborating on this identity so that you are also able to tell whether we are actually benefiting from that broad membership or not when it comes to conveyance of the information which is critical for our negotiators. The idea for establishing this network by the AACC was to make sure that we are coordinated as faith actors, we are organized, we are evidence-based in our advocacy, and we also raise the profile of climate justice at all the levels that are critical in our work. And these levels are at the local level in our different countries, but also at the continental level during the Africa Climate Week, summits, all those platforms, but most importantly at the global level where our negotiators really require the critical information to pursue our agenda with regards to various issues that affect us. But you will see that how we work, we are able to accumulate as much as we can in terms of the crisis issues that we face, the losses and damages that we face at the local level, the droughts, the failed harvests, and all the other challenges that you may know that are associated with climate change. But when it comes now to having these data finding their way in the negotiation room, then that's where it becomes a problem. Yes, at national level, we work with individual negotiators at the level of ministers, at the level of government officials, at the level of negotiators who are part of the civil society. But we don't seem to have an official and also a predictable and guaranteed way of conveying our messages or conveying our data in a more timely way to the negotiators, particularly at the time when they will be engaging in the rooms. So this is actually the major limitation that we are observing, despite the fact that we have the data, despite the fact that we have our members on the ground facing all these challenges, and they have them at their fingertips, but where to deposit them becomes an issue. Yes, here and there we meet these officials at those various platforms, but where it matters most at the UN level, when they are in those rooms, we are not there to be able to convey the timely data which is actually required. But otherwise, we have everything that is required for our people to strengthen their positions as they negotiate. So this is what I can say. You can see that we are all over, we have the data, but we seem to lack the official way of timely conveying the message when it is required by the negotiators.
Thank you, Dr. Tinashe. What I hear from you is there is no shortage of evidence. There is evidence on ground. The problem is the transmission of that evidence to the rooms that matter, which brings me to another group, the ECOSOC. Vinesh, ECOSOC represents the voices of African civil society. And from your perspective, I wonder how well those voices are also reflected in Africa's positions during COP negotiations. Is there a break in transmission?
Well, ECOSOC is definitely a platform that brings together civil society, NGOs, think tanks, and so on and so forth. But we also try to reach out, I would say, grassroots organizations, which basically to just relate with data collection of what's happening on the ground, which is always a big challenge. We may, at the level of ECOSOC, work on policy recommendations. We can formulate quite a number of, I would say, policy framing that will help us attain our or achieve our Agenda 2063. But the problem is our voice would limit to the level of documents that are submitted through negotiators, basically. And then what happens in the room where the negotiations happen, let's say, okay, openly it's one thing, but overnight, and I would say even over hours, if not minutes, things can flip completely. So the question that I ask myself, do we as ECOSOC, as an AU organ, sit in that room and take strong position representing the voice of the civil society? I was mentioning the 600 million Africans without electricity, and to voice this out strongly, to say, listen, we, the continent, we are powering the world. But when it comes to the world supporting Africa's development, be it energy, so-called transition, amongst others, why should we be depending on the world's vote for our own progress? This is a gap. We don't have that platform to voice it out. So how can we achieve having that position is a question which I believe is open to not just this room, but earlier it was mentioned, when can we truly act as one Africa? I think Mr. Briggs earlier mentioned India, China with one US ambassador, while Africa, some 50 US ambassadors, okay? So why can't we have one strong voice that can really speak for the 1.2 billion Africans, and at least for those 600 million who really need energy? So that's how we take it at the level of ECOSOC, that, okay, we can make recommendations, but the voice, we need to make that heard as well.
Thank you, Vinesh. And I think we've heard it. Two institutions, two versions of the same fracture. Strong mandates, strong architecture, but there's a transmission failure. Nana, you stand in that gap, and it's very important for us to understand from your own perspective, because Africa brings genuine expertise and the moral authority to COP every single year. But outcomes have repeatedly fallen short of our expectations. How much of that gap is about the positions themselves, and how much is about the infrastructure or the absence of that infrastructure behind the negotiators?
Okay, so thank you so much, Victoria. I want to start by saying that I think I'm a bit, I don't know how to start the conversation because we are mixing a number of things together. We need to be able to understand the structure of the climate negotiations, the preparations towards the negotiations, and the nature of the conversation in the rooms, and how stakeholders can actually feed into the conversation. And I think that is something that we need to lay out the structures very well. It hasn't been total failure on the side of Africa, because if you Google, for example, the contribution of the Africa group of negotiators in the climate change negotiations, I think it's been more positive than negative, because it is the AGN that actually drove the Article 7 of the Paris Agreement. Had it not been the AGN, there wasn't any Article 7, because the whole Paris Agreement was being envisaged under the context of emission reduction. Africa came stronger within the context of, even if we want to reduce emissions within the context of nationally determined contributions, we still have to have the impacts of climate change. And so position adaptation at the level of mitigation. And that was the starting point of the Paris Agreement. The second aspect has to do with the NDCs which are nationally determined. I'll come to the issues one by one because I need to also set some kind of important pointers for us to be able to understand within which context is this infrastructure very important. And so the adaptation component of the NDCs was also a bigger strength from the African perspective. The loss and damage issue came strongly because it was the African voices together with the small land state that the world is having the loss and damage fund as it's established now. And then if you look at the Green Climate Fund, that talks about access of 50-50 shares, so 50% adaptation, 50% mitigation share of the fund portfolio. I think it's the African voices that got the 50% adaptation share within the, so I can articulate those successes, but the question is, are we at where we are, or are we at where we wanted to be? And the answer is no. In the negotiations, I think there are two things that are always the issue, and it is about adaptation and finance. All the others, I think they are not issues of contention. So if you hear the negotiations dragging to the last end, it is an issue of finance or an issue of adaptation targets, and these are always the issues. And so how can we probably enhance our voices? Victoria, to be honest, the strong room, the issue that we are talking about, which is the situational room today, it is long overdue. My question now is even the effectiveness between now and COP31, because COP31 is just closer. The preparations that will go into the situational room, which kind of data do we actually collect? How do we assess this data? And how this data is transmitted into the conversation that we're talking about. So to get a good outcome is not just the 2 weeks of the conversation that happened at the COP. Yeah. It is a year built up of engagement in different aspects. And that every piece of it must be built up closely. I was just listening to the presentation on the just transition, and it is 100% narrative that he spoke about. So where are you transitioning from? You don't even have the existing basic element to transition with. And these are some of the voices that we want to hear. The structure of the UNFCCC is such that there are parties and non-party stakeholders who contribute to the conversation. I think we are struggling to let our non-party stakeholders find their voices, because at the other side, you hear them very well. Those non-party stakeholders are in the rooms through other voices. So I think this is where we come in together, understanding different stock of data that is important, understanding different angles of intelligence that will be relevant in the room, and then trying to put this together in a more coherent and adhesive manner to be able to get the results that is needed. We may start from COP31, which is a very good starting point, and then aiming at maybe enhancing our tentacles for COP32, which we claim to be an African COP here in Addis Ababa. So this is how I want to actually structure the whole conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nana. And let me piggyback on what you've just described, the different types or categories of data that we need to collect. You have Vinesh and you have Dr. Tinashe sitting beside you. They both represent the same group of Africans, but under different umbrellas. Would you kindly tell us in very practical terms, twofolds, one, what kind of data would you need from the group that Dr. Tinashe represents and the group that ECOSOC represents? And secondly, how do we get this data to you in the room?
Okay, so what kind of data do we need? Anybody who understands the UNFCCC negotiations should know that it's not a workshop. So normally that's the misconception because there's maybe one meeting. There are different agenda items. The key agenda items that are relevant for Africa today, it's adaptation financing, finance in general for climate action in the context of historical responsibility. So that's the second thing. The third one, we're discussing just transition. In fact, when the conversation started, it started as just energy transition. And we are saying that it is not just energy transition. It is just transition for the various elements that he presented. So not only energy, and even with energy, what kind of energy are we talking about? Also talk of access, talk of clean cooking, talk of the labor force within the African continent, talk of the vulnerable communities that are actually being threatened with climate impacts and so on and so. How do you build resilience within this transition? And so it's not just an energy transition, but a transition that looks at these angles. So information and data is also visibly needed within that context. We're talking of losses and damages associated with climate impacts. Without evidences on the ground, without data on the ground about how much losses are we talking about in terms of economic losses and then non-economic losses on the ground, you cannot quantify anything and say that, oh, loss and damage is important for Africa. To what extent? And so data in that aspect is also very critical. We're talking about emissions within the context of what? Equity. To what extent is our emission? We normally say it's less than 4%. Okay, that is the general understanding. But even within this context, what is the distribution even like within the continent? All this kind of information understanding is very critical. You mentioned the issue of the decision on the climate finance within the NCQG. In fact, when we talk of vulnerable countries within the continent, within the UNFCCC, LDCs are 48 countries. Out of the 48 countries, 34 of them are from Africa. So even within the LDC context, 34 of the countries are from the African continent. So it's even more than what you were talking about the number 12. And that is only the LDCs. And the vulnerability is not only for the LDCs, there are also other developing countries within the continent that are also equally vulnerable. What is the national data and information in these countries? How do you actually put this data and information together in a picture that projects African holistic vulnerability and opportunities? Yeah. And how is this projected within the room? I think this is what we need to be able to be talking and be discussing around. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nana. Dr. Tinashe, Nana has painted a picture of what the data problem looks like. You earlier in your intervention described what the data collection looks like. My question to you now is, having listened to what Nana has described, what the need is, how they need that data, would you say that you and the congregants and the AAC have collected data in a manner that is useful, or in a structure that can be used by the negotiators? If that is not the situation, what is, and what is the barrier?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, indeed, from his intervention, it is clear that they require data for them to support whatever position they may require. So as faith actors, we are not experts, but we are nearer where things are happening. We have the evidence, we are feeling and experiencing the crisis. So now we are challenged as a group, especially in this platform, we are challenged to start to think about how best can we assist our negotiators with the rightful data, in the right amount, in a timely manner, and also in a more predictable manner. which means we are also challenging this forum to think about a mechanism which can actually allow us to give our negotiators whatever we have in whatever form, but with that mechanism allowing for that data to be put in the right format, in the right quality, in the right form, format that can actually be useful to our negotiators. So this is a challenge that I'm actually putting across to say, let's come up probably from this meeting with that mechanism, and I'm happy that he has already preempted what I am thinking. If we could actually visualize a mechanism at COP, at some of these, at COP 31, for example, where we are having a situation room that he has talked about. At some point, as faith actors, we have been part of a consortium within the faith community. I think Ambassador Musi here can actually be a witness. We also pursued a similar approach with the Faith Pavilion, where as faith actors, we just needed somewhere to deposit our voices, and it worked. Of course, we need to make sure that we resuscitate that. But I think from the non-state actors, the broader civil society perspective, we also need to have something like that sort, so that at the end of the day, everyone at an individual level, we know where to put our voices, we know where to put our concerns, where they can be manufactured in such a way that they can now be useful. So in short, I would also buy the idea of a a pavilion or a situation room where, as an individual down in Kenya, in a community in Kenya, I'm able to transmit whatever I have, whatever I am experiencing, in whatever form, which can then be made useful for our negotiators. So I'm for that particular idea. But how it comes out, I think, is now for our technical people to see how they can actually make use of whatever we have. But the data, anyway, it is there and it has to be transmitted, and you know better how to make it useful.
Thank you, Dr. Tinashe. And I'll come to you, Vinesh, because you did the full presentation for us, and so I'm assuming that you have all the answers now. When we speak of data and ownership of data, someone had asked that question to Anika this morning. And the interventions of Nana and Dr. Tinashe lead me to reflect on who would own the data in this situation room that you have described. And I ask that question because, one, or I would need you to start from the preliminary question. Do we have all the data that we require, the data that Nana has described on our African soil? That's one. And that begs the question of data sovereignty, data ownership, right? The second is, if we do not, when we are sourcing this data, who owns the data at the end of the day that our negotiators will be using? And how can ECOSOC ensure that this ownership and this data sovereignty of Africans are protected?
Well, a very difficult question, I would say, because...
In a difficult position.
Yes. Okay. Simple question to the audience here. Do you know, in terms of energy again, what we require? I'm coming back to those 600 million Africans to solve the problem. Let's say to have at least one bulb, let's even say one solar panel, or let's say small community that can have a pump and to just pump that water to have safe water. Do you know what is that energy amount? I'm not going to be technical, but I give you an indication. It is between 50, which is the lowest, to 110 terawatt hours, okay? So forget about the terawatt, just consider 100. Now a second question. The world's natural resources, minerals, What is the percentage represented by Africa? Do you have an idea? Indicative representation. 30% approximately. If you take Congo DRC, just Congo, with its export of cobalt, I'm going to answer your question, Victoria. It's 70% of the world's exportation of cobalt. So from where do we get these, let's say, figures, basically? Well, it comes from government, it comes from those operating in the mining industry, but it also comes from those buying such minerals, right? Now, do you know what is the energy you input to extract the minerals from Africa? Any indication? I've said the energy gap or deficit, it's 100. What is the energy input in minerals extraction in Africa? Anyone? Even a random figure, just give me a figure. No one. 140 terawatt hour, which means if we truly wanted to solve the problem of energy in Africa, we could have done it. But we are taking that same energy to extract minerals, to pull those minerals out of the continent to do what? To fuel global progress and not the progress of Africa. Is that normal? Who is allowing minerals to be exported? Well, I have the chance to be a technical guy from the ECOSOC. I'm not the political guy, so I'm able to speak it out, okay? Or voice it out pretty loud. So it's our decision makers, basically. But coming back to the data, now, if you look, the figures that I'm giving to you, where do I get these figures? World Bank, the International Energy Agency, okay? They have the figures. Basically, they own the figures. Now, the next question, how do they collect these data? Do they have a field intelligence? Who are those on the ground doing that field intelligence to collect the data? Are they walking across, I would say, those rural Africa where we have that energy deficit? I'm not too sure. I think the information that we are at hands today, the data, are erroneous. And we absolutely need to build something which we call, again, data sovereignty. And I, again, believe ECOSOC is the right platform with the citizens' connection, okay, at grassroots level. Now, we are not going to collect data, again, about the minerals extraction and exports, but we can collect data about what's happening on the ground and how the African citizens are suffering on the ground and how we can address these. That's one. The second thing, now, if we need to let's say to transmit or transfer those data, okay, in those negotiation rooms, okay, until and unless we can really, because there's one word that has been mentioned, evidence. How do you prove that you have collected that? I think we are in an age where digitalization, it has been mentioned earlier, we have quite some innovative tools. It can be done, but there is a need here at the, I would say, AU level, not just ECOSOC as an organ, but collectively with the civil society to start a journey to collecting true data. And that should be owned by us, Africa. That cannot be otherwise. And we should be the one giving data to the World Bank, okay, and to the rest of whatever institutions worldwide. That's how I personally see it. But the journey has to start. And it has started in a sense. And the reason why I'm saying that, and just to summarize one critical point, do you know that just with $400 US, we can address that energy deficit that we were talking, I was saying earlier, of, let's say, one family. Oh, let me put it in a simple term. $2,000 US, we can solve that energy gap issue for a household, those who are not having access. Do you think the 1.2 or 3 trillion that was voted for Africa for X number of years, then downgraded to 300 million or so, okay? If you just take the extractive energy sector again, you take 1 or 2% of what they exploit, it would equal to 200 million US dollars, a billion, sorry, 200 billion US dollars, 1 or 2%. You split that over 10 years. It means putting 20 billion US dollars, okay, in Africa to solve the problem. Is it that difficult? I think there is a problem. So the data that we are talking about today is just to fool us, to manipulate us. And until we address the issue by ourselves, we are going to, you know, there is a saying in French, tourner en bourrique. So we will be the donkeys, basically. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Vinesh. So in order for us to avoid being the donkeys, you have talked about data sovereignty. Let's come back to Nana. Data, or the legitimacy, right, of the Situation Room would be dependent on the sovereignty of the data collected. How do we manage that situation? It's very complex, I know, but we have to start the conversation from somewhere.
Yes, so I think that's the reason why I spoke earlier on about time. Yeah, because I am an academic, and so I know how data is generated, processed, and then communicated. And if you really want to have a proper way of generating data from the ground, it has to go through a number of validation processes to make sure that this data is truly representative of what we're talking about. So, but it doesn't also stop us not to start. So for me, there's always a good chance to start from the various institutions that you already have on the ground that are already doing this work. We don't need to reinvent the wheel from the beginning. There are already existing structures, both public, private, and civil society. Even within, I just heard today that even faith-based organizations or institutions are even collecting data for climate justice. In fact, I just heard it today. I've heard them in the rooms. I never even knew that they also have a channel of actually gathering data to support this conversation. So in a nutshell, I think we have a very broad spectrum of actors that are already ready to be able to collect the data. What we need to do is to have this central point that we're talking about so that all this data will come. Because, for example, energy that is talking about, energy is broad. What is needed within the context of climate change might be within maybe when it comes to the justice aspect and then also the emissions aspect. This is something that you need specific line of understanding what type of energy data is needed. It's not the entire energy data that will be needed. And so even within the spectrum of a particular energy or data source, you have to have some kind of pointers of what exactly is needed for what in the room. And I think once we get the broad understanding of this data from the various sources, it comes to the Situation Room, the analyst will analyze them vis-a-vis the climate negotiation language and then demands. And then from there, you can be able to actually filter what will be going into the room, and then which of these data are also going to be used for momentum gathering. So for negotiation, it's not only about the test. I think the momentum outside the test room is even more important because it also sends a sense of what signal to whoever is sitting around the table that the temperatures around or outside the room are not favorable. So we should be very careful about whatever we agreed upon in the room here. So those kind of strategies need to align with the stakeholders that are African. For me, if it is non-African, I will not, because I am not supporting those kind of, already we have been downgraded. We are trying to come up within the context. And so I wouldn't sit for somebody to generate the data and say, oh, this is for the African context. If it is African tested data that is going for the interest of the African region, the AGN is ready to work with it and then pursue it within which angle that we want to use it. So I think this is what I can say in
Thank
that
you.
direction. Yeah.
Thank you, Nana. One more question before we come to the audience. Nana has just informed us that he wasn't aware faith-based organizations collect data. So you see there's an awareness gap. And I wonder, in addition to the awareness gap, because there's always a comorbidity between awareness and coherence or coordination. To what extent do you, Dr. Tinashe, coordinate with other groups, African groups that collect data?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think in my introductory remarks, when I was trying to define the Africa Faith Actors Network for Climate Justice, I indicated that it is a multi-faith network. It also collaborates with the academia. It also collaborates also even with the ministry departments in the various countries and with the civil society in general. So you can see that it's actually a low-hanging fruit for our negotiators, because it's a pool of experts, non-experts. Yes, as faith actors, we are not that experts, but we coordinate these other experts. So as a result, we have been trying to utilize all the spaces that avail themselves. I talked about at continental level with the summits, the climate summits, the Africa Climate Weeks, and even also the UNFCCC processes, the COPs. We have been coordinating ourselves through these side events, but as indicated earlier on, these remain outside the formal and the official processes of influencing what we want to be influenced. So this has been the limitation, but otherwise, the coordination side of the story, we have filled that particular gap. But one more thing that I also need to emphasize as we envisage this situation room, we need, you talked about the ownership of the data, you asked him about the legitimacy of the data, but as faith actors, we are also worried about the trust issues. We do all this donkey work on the ground, giving you all this data, but at the end of the day, we don't see that data actually influencing the decisions that we want that affect our situation on the ground. Then we begin to question also what we would have done as a continent. So for you to also guarantee the trustworthiness of this situation room, we also need to we need to be committed to accountability. We need you to be accountable, or this situation room should be accountable to individuals who are affected on the ground, not the negotiators, not even the other institutions that you may think of, the ECOSOC and others. We need to be accountable and answerable to the individual who is affected by the losses and the damages on the ground, who is not accessing the energy as he has indicated. So issues of accountability should be emphasized at the beginning, because we are saying we want to use the COP31 as a test case, but I also challenge us to continue in that direction, but bearing in mind that the most important person is the individual, the citizen who is on the ground, and not these institutions. Otherwise, if we don't emphasize that, because data can be manipulated, it can mean a different story from what I would have experienced on the ground when I initiated the communication itself. So we need to be careful on that one.
Thank you very much. Now we will come to the audience. Let's see, we have 1,000,001 hands up. So formally, Mr. Briggs started from the back. I will start from the front. Yes. Can we get a microphone for him, please?
So for the purposes of the record, I would repeat my name.
Okay.
Dr. Kwabena Obrieboa, Board Chairman, Code for Africa, Africa Diaspora Organization. Listening to you talking about data, what we can do in terms of the African transition, what I've been thinking about, I've been scribbling down things is, when we talk about the diaspora, where is our role? How can we offer our technical skills, innovation, investment to really achieve this goal that we are all talking about. Because just as I've been reading through the document, the focus, there's also a bigger focus of this whole initiative on the diaspora. So, but I didn't hear anything about the diaspora. That's what I want to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Nabi Alul Talahun, and I represent an NGO that also works in climate change. This is a really interesting discussion for us as Ethiopians because COP32 is going to be taking place in Addis Ababa next year in November 2027. So this is a really great discussion, but I had a few questions, and I wanted to start with the story that you had, Ms. Victoria, that there was a 1.3 trillion fund that was decided, and without calling the participants, another decision was made. Okay, so is this the decision of data, or is this the decision of a seat at the table, or the manipulation of seats at tables? That's one. Yes. The second question that I have is that even the pledges that are being made are not being paid by the countries. Yeah. So we can have all the correct data that we would want. Okay, I know from the Paris Agreement that there was 100 billion pledges and 35 billion was coming to Africa per year. These 350 billion, 100 billion, they're not being decided on in a vacuum. The 35 billion that's coming every year is slightly less than the debt servicing fees that are going back to Western countries. So there is a net payment. Okay. The last point that I wanted to make is there are many excuses that are being given by countries internationally, particularly Western countries, that say that African countries and developing countries have many other ways of making money through climate change. And one of them would be selling carbon credits to international countries. And if you know the subject, then you know how carbon credits are generated through wind farms and forests and this and that. 1 carbon ton is now being paid internationally at $20 US per ton. The World Bank itself has said that the average payment market value is $85. Let me go back to my question. Is this a question of data or is this the question of manipulation? I would like to hear from the panelists.
Okay, we'll take the gentleman in red, and then the panelists will answer very quickly. Then we will take you. Hey. Okay, if we can make the questions faster, we can beat the 1 hour time. Okay, so sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Gordon Simango with the All Africa Conference of Churches. I am intrigued and excited by the whole initiative of a situation room. And I think it's a very noble idea and also demonstrates leadership from ourselves in terms of where we see the gap and how we can support the negotiators and the information that they need. But thinking about that as well, I have been wondering, like, why would we make it a situation room during negotiations? Isn't that we are supposed to keep the finger on the pulse? That we should think even before, like this situation room should actually be functional. For me, it would be, I think, shooting ourselves in the feet to wait until the negotiations to have this situation room functioning. Because I think in terms of preparing our negotiators, much of the work and the groundwork is done well before. And I think we need to be in touch with them well before that. And so I'm just thinking whether we can extend the whole issue of the situation room during the negotiation, which sounds like ad hoc, to a situation room that runs through 360 degrees. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. I would come to the panel, but I just wanted to say 2 things. It is not a question of data alone, right? It's a political question, and data in itself is political. I would take a cue from what Nana said about the data that you need for negotiation and the data that you need to put pressure on the outside world so that they know that something serious is happening. We want to go this year organized, and not just being organized internally as we always have been, but to be seen to be organized. That in itself is a political strategy that would mount pressure on certain people that always manipulate. And for the Situation Room, in fact, you're correct. This is something that the AGN president has said over and over again. We need to find a way to ensure this information or this process data gets to the negotiators before time. So we would have like simulation exercises which are already planned. But yes, that was a very important intervention. I would now come to Nana very quickly to take some of the questions.
I think it's working now. Yeah, so I'll be very quick because the questions are many. So the last one you just addressed that. So that's what I've been saying, that it is something that we don't have to think about it as ad hoc. But for me, I always say that every 1,000 miles journey starts with the first step. And then the first step must be right. If you get a first step right, then you can be able to actually have the hope that the journey is going to be enjoying. And so it's a good thing to start with this, learn lessons, and then see how this can be an African thing. And this is also something that we need to also gather political momentum around, because it's going to serve the continent right. I've been listening in the morning about reparations and we taking our rightful positions. I think if there's any place where there's injustice in the conversation, then it is the climate change negotiations. And this is where we need this kind of what evidences. Sometimes some noise are good to support some of these issues. I'm coming from a meeting in Baku last night, and this is some of the things that is being discussed. Always, we don't have to come from the periphery. And so we need to start putting our homes together. And this is a good start for me, but I agree with you, it has to be a permanent structure for the continent. The issue of carbon, it's also another discussion. The price of the carbon is determined by a number of factors. The type of carbon that is generated, even within the context of different sources of carbon, the prices differ. And so if you are generating carbon from forests, if you are generating carbon from cook stoves, if you are generating carbon from waste, which is landfill sites and so on and so forth, the processes of certification differ in most of the time. Some of them, for land, for example, it goes through a whole lot of complications in terms of land rights and then other things. So one of the key determinants of the price of that carbon is about the certification process that carbon goes through. Another one, because it's a market, it depends on its demand and supply. So if it is too much generated, then obviously the price will go. I'll come back to the World Bank ceiling. If the price, if the product is too much on the market, obviously the price falls. If the product is scarce, then the price automatically also goes up. And so for the World Bank is saying what is being sold by the World Bank, it's higher because they're able to negotiate better. And this is where the continent needs to come together and then put premium on the prices of carbon that is generated from the African continent. And I know the AU is working on this with a uniform voice in that direction. I didn't want to talk about the 1.3 trillion, but it looks like it keeps on coming. Yes. So I need to probably straighten it. So it wasn't any decision on that. The thing is that before we went into Baku, there was a replacement of the 100 billion pledge in Copenhagen some years back that had not been fulfilled. And all parties had agreed in Glasgow that we needed a replacement by 2025. And that replacement has to be with what we call the NCQG, so non-quantifiable climate collective goal. So it is collectively going to be done by all of us. Before we went into that conversation, looking at the history that we had from the 100 billion pledge, Africa went prepared. So the 1.7, in fact, Africa's figure was not 1.3 trillion, it was 1.7 trillion only for the African continent. Other subcontinents also have their proposals. And so in effect, on average, what would the world need? How much would the world need? What we call need-based action or needs-based financing. Should we be serious as UNFCCC to address climate change? A minimum of 1.3 trillion. So that was the conversation, that at least we would need an amount of 1.3 trillion annually to be able to address the needs of climate change. So that wasn't a decision, it was proposals from developing countries. And whether the West will accept it or not is a different conversation. And this is where the game-changing issues actually came in. And so there were two decisions on the climate financing issue. So there was provision aspect and mobilization aspect. The provision aspect is where you use public finance or grants to support climate action. And this is where the 300 billion annually was agreed. So for public financing, 300 billion annually, which is way below what the expectations are. So that's one aspect. And then there was another decision for 1.3 trillion mobilization. Mobilization means you're mobilizing from all sources, so public, philanthropy, civil society, any other sources. This aspect is more dangerous because you don't have control as parties over the mobilization and how it's going to be utilized. And so that is a little narrative around the whole thing. Maybe we can engage later more on that conversation. And then the issue on the diaspora, I think it is a very good question. The interesting thing is that you are welcome in every aspect of the whole conversation. In fact, if you know the processes of the UNFCCC, it starts with submissions. And the submissions is that the portal is open for parties and non-party stakeholders. And you are allowed to submit your views as a non-party stakeholder on what you think the issues are. On another way, now that you know there is an AGN that also collates views of the African, you can preempt us to know that this is what we, the people from diaspora, think that we are bringing to the table in the conversation. How do we manage it as what? As African continent? And that will also be one other way that, so there are different avenues that probably we can discuss outside this conversation.
Thank you, Nana. We'll take 3 more questions because we have less than 10 minutes. So I would start with the lady, and then I'll come to you. The lady with, yes, you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is, one of the most interesting discussions and very factual, informative, not only for somebody in the development industry, but for, an African citizen itself. It's very informative, and I'm very happy with, the fire that the stage is actually bringing to the participants. I remember in grad school where that negotiation actually happened. We were sitting and we were talking about development because I'm a development enthusiast and I was doing my master's there. And we were having a discussion saying, you know what, the major contributors of the climate consequences are the least contributors. Not only, were the total amount of compensation reduced, but the contributor themselves are the major contributors to the consequence, but the least payers. And that part was very painful. And we were, a classroom of multiple African citizens. And it was really, really painful to see that. And I'm really, really personally happy to know that, things are changing 2 years down the line, and numbers are coming up, and, involved citizens are actually growing from, here and there. I think, this takes me back to, a meeting room that I was in 14 years ago, where there was, a Global North Development Financing Director in a room. And we were trying to talk about how we can actually bring change and development in a specific industry, in the agriculture sector. And that person jokingly said, you know what, I think the solution is crisis management. And we thought of that in a direct manner, but that person was saying, you know what, you have to create a crisis first, and then manage it. So little did we know that a lot of our development issues are not direct. The crisis was actually created at first, and the management solution was given to us, so that we kept on facing crisis after crisis for the past 50, 60 years in African history. So I think this takes me back to say, like, the major intention, at least as a citizen who understands, from what you are saying in the energy and climate justice sector, is climate change happened because there was a wrong intention, right? It was widening the gap of development between the haves and the have-nots, right? So that's where, the colonial history and its impact actually emanated. So the intention was not just to, the consequence is not just a climate only, but it was a development construct. So it widened the development because we are having a consequence on one side, and we cannot finance our development aspirations on the other. So this is a global governance issue, it's not just a climate action. So that's why we need to understand it is very interlinked and complex in its nature by design. So another question is on the data collection and analysis. What is the exhaustiveness of the variables and the depth of the consequence calculation? Because it's not just the direct cost of, harvest losses and health losses or so, but, what is, the foregone development cost for Africans for, recapping on adaptation and transition, but also the cost of not developing the way that other developed countries have already done so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take two more people very quickly. I'm really sorry. Maybe you can corner the panelists afterwards. I'll take, yes, the man in, then the lady behind. Please, let's make it short. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Victoria, Moderator Victoria, for this give me chance. My question is that I have two questions, short questions, to use the time. One is the doctors tells us about diaspora. Diaspora living outside of their country, but local, everybody knows about local, knows about their country because they are from their country. How would you use diaspora for initiating Africa development? The second question is that the research about 100 billion in Africa, there is a lack of energy because we have many opportunity like alternative energies like solar energy, water energy, a lot of energy. And how it happened, this much of abundant population, where do you got this kind of update information? I have this question with apology. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peace and blessings, family. I'll be to the point. One of the things I want to mention that this is not a data problem. It's not about talking points or poor negotiation skills. This is an energy problem that started over 500 years ago when 10 to 15 million, maybe 50 million was taken from Mama Africa. That is raw energy. We have an author in the States, he talks about the term transduction of energy, where energy is maneuvered and directed a certain way. So when our African leaders go into COP 3129, And it's the point to say when the sister said the continent should be closed, it's something, just imagine if Mama Africa said, the leaders got together, we're gonna close the continent for a year. No, let's say a month. The world would stop. The world would stop. Energy. So no longer are we sitting in the seat giving out energy. Guess what? Everybody would come. And what is that called? Power. Power isn't just giving out. Power is holding back. That is negotiation. That is leverage. Energy continues to be taken from Mama Africa. When we go into those rooms now, no. If we don't get this, then you don't get that. Energy. We got to understand what energy is, what power looks like, and what real leverage is. That stops today. We are now in receivership mode. No more giving out. It comes back to us.
I'll take one more person. The lady in red, I believe, was raising her hands, and that would be the last person. Okay, give the guy there. Please make it short. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for to attend this conference. I have two questions. The first one is, what do you think is there a just transition without considering the people? For instance, before goes to clean cooking, is African people got enough and nutrient food? Since Africa has many aspirations and also goal. For instance, Agenda 2030 and also 2063. So we need to balance planet, people, and prosperity to achieve sustainable development goals. What do you think about this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I would start from Vinesh about diaspora. Someone said if the diaspora do not live here in Africa, they live somewhere else. So why should they be important? Just very quickly.
Well, I believe we are in one world. Okay, we may live in different geographical regions. I had the opportunity to represent the ECOSOC 1 week ago on global water diplomacy. And one of the presenters was showing how the weather conditions in Asia is influencing what's happening in Africa, and what's happening in Africa is influencing the rest of the world. So if we are undergoing serious climate impact, negative impacts here, so it would automatically be impacting other parts of the world. So the diaspora, to me, I think is just a word. So basically we are just one. Even beyond the continent, we are still one. Absolutely. So that's a very basic thing that we need to understand. And the claim, when it comes back to, okay, why we need to support the continent's, I would say, not sustainable development, because honestly, I don't focus much on SDGs. I'm really more focusing on the Agenda 2063. To say that we have our own priorities and contexts, so the diaspora should be interested to what's happening here, and through the various platforms, NGOs or whatever think tanks you have, you need to engage with an organ such as ECOSOC, which is the right entry point to make your voices heard, okay? Yeah. And that we also have the possibility to convey, I would say, our thoughts, our feeling, that you can voice it out. I understood you're based in Germany, right? Yeah, then you can lobby there to vote in favor, to have the relevant, let's say, whatever amount, I'm not talking about figures, but to push in favor of XYZ initiatives in Africa to improve the context. So that's why the diaspora is important. Absolutely. Because if we improve here, it will improve also for you. And the lady at the back just mentioned, let's hold back. Let's imagine a second, if, again, the continent was just one country, one policy when it comes to exporting its national resources would just block all LNGs, all whatever extraction. Come on, 1.3 trillion, we just sell it and we get the money. So why are we hitting our head in a transition, or how you call it, a just transition session in a whatever room? So anyways, that's my interpretation of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinesh. And one quick word from Dr. Tinashe. Then we move to Nana. You answer questions and one quick word from you, and we call it a day.
Thank you. Yeah, you can see that I don't have any question on from the floor, but I just wanted also to reinforce what my director, Dr. Gordon, said about us. Yes, this is going to be the test case. It's an experiment, COP31, but let's start to have a long-term plan with regards to the situation room. Otherwise, if we just have it as an ad hoc thing, even those who may want to come and assist us technically, let's say the diaspora, maybe they may also think to say, no, it's just for COP31, then they dismiss it. So let's have a long-term plan, and that is where we can also bring them in so that they can also give us whatever they can from the technical side of the story. Otherwise, I want to thank you so much for this. I assured you that the data is there, stories are there, but they need to be channeled in a more predictable way to our negotiators.
Thank you. Nana, in 1 minute.
Oh, okay. So I think this is the session that had most of the questions. I tried to write, even I've written more than 11, but it means that we are very engaged in this subject matter. The lady who spoke about development, I think I cannot agree with you more. And that is the position of the AGN. You cannot shut us down not to develop within the context of global emissions because you have already taken your development space. And this is the narrative. So we need transformation, we need development, we need industrialization. And this is what, but the question is, there's a technical aspect of it, and then also there's a political aspect of it. So whether the technical moves directly with the politics is a different conversation. And so we need to probably, and I know our leaders are also aware of this conversation. And this is what we need to champion in the room to make sure that that development space for the continent needs to be preserved. At what cost? We need to also assess that one, because that is very important. The cost of not developing. The first obvious thing is what? This poverty cycle that you continue to be in. And then that inferiority complex continue to be hanging on our necks as a continent. So that actually ties in with the issue of we taking a break. If I were to be the president of Africa, I would have stopped this negotiation for a while. I don't have that power. But the point is that I think at some point in time, we need to actually get to ask ourselves, is our presence there relevant? If we are not getting the traction that is needed, then we need to reevaluate. Another side of that same question is, there's also another side that if we also had not been there, certain decisions might have also been worse. And so we need to manage this, but we need to steady the mindset of our people that we are dealing with. You are 100% right that why is US always running away from emission reduction? Why is US always moving away from issues that bind them? It's because of this issue of trust, because they cannot be trusted in this conversation. And we need to understand that. So if there's any pressure to put pressure on the big emitters to move away rather than shutting our development space down as Africa. The last one, Victoria. So the just transition that our gentleman spoke about is exactly what my brother actually articulated. So it is not just energy transition. I will ask you to go to the UNFCCC online, look at the AGN submission on just transition, and you can understand. We have written, in fact, a whole bunch of issues, how we want the just transition to look like. And so it's also important that actors also pick this conversation and then support us. We have one unit or one organization, which is the International Trade Union Africa, which is actually supporting us with the labor side. We need people from the energy side to be stronger, and then also those from the development space to make sure that the conversation around the rooms are coherent for the interests of Africa. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I think there's a lot we can do together as Africa. within this conversation. Climate change is cross-sectoral, so every sector has a role to play in this conversation. We have heard today about how important even faith-based activities are in this conversation. So don't shut down your room. Get us into this kind of conversation, and we'll be willing to talk more. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nana. A round of applause for our people. We've had so many silver bullets today, but we've talked about trust, sovereignty, legitimacy, the political conversations around willingness, even about truth and why certain people are engaging the avoidance strategy like the US. But on a final note, I think one of the things that I think it was Vinesh pointed out and Nana supported is the fact that we are transitioning from nothing to what? This is a question we have to keep thinking about. But in the process of thinking about that conversation, we realize that justice begins with being in the room. We can decide to shut down, but there is a flip side of it, as Nana has pointed out. Justice begins with being in the room. Impact comes from being ready when the room changes. Thank you all for listening to us, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And you see, she was talking about just transition, but we are transitioning from lunch to dinner. And I just received a message from Patrick. Patrick, wave your hand. He wanted to do an energizer. I said no. He was saying it's Friday evening. It's time for me. My belly is crying for something, but let me see how early we can end this today. It's Friday evening, Patrick, don't worry. So some very quick housekeeping before we come to the closed session. We know it has been a long day. You are hungry, you are thirsty. The coffee, the tea, the snacks are there, but we'll end very soon, don't worry. So please bear with us and be with us for, for a few more minutes. Before we go for lunch, we had invited the young ones at the back. Come and sit in front. We have removed the nameplates, but you have not taken your chance. But tomorrow, hopefully you come, you sit in front, okay? So for those who have not signed the attendance, please do it needful. Before, if you are here and you have not signed the attendance, kindly do that for us. And also, I see many of you have been taking photos. We have the photo booth and so on. So don't forget to tag, the Citizens Forum, to tag ECOSOC, to tag African Union, so that we can amplify the voice. So now we have a solidarity statement by our friend, the Dr. Ino, the Registrar of the African Court. You're asking, what is the African Court doing here? The African Court is one of the organs of the African Union, celebrating the 20 years this year. Last year, 2 years back, we celebrated our own 20 years. So I kindly request our friend, the registrar, Dr. Robert Ino, to come on stage to deliver the solidarity statement. This is to show you that at the AU, we work, within the organs, there's so much synergy. And Dr. Ino, the African Court was with us when we celebrated our 20 years. So today they are celebrating the 20 years this year. So we are also standing in solidarity with them. So Dr. Ino, thank you, sir, for joining us. And please have the floor for your statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Doc. It has been a very long day, but a very rich one as well, with a lot of knowledge, some of them quite technical in nature. I had prepared a 60-minute solidarity statement because my president who sent me here told me that if you want to show solidarity with somebody, you should go it all out and show full solidarity. But given the time, and I can see people are tired, I've tried to reduce it to half an hour. And the statement was long because I'm very passionate about issues of access to justice. I've worked in the African human rights system for almost 3 decades now. So I've seen it all. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've seen where access to justice has yielded results and where lack of access has caused problems. So I invite you, especially the young ones behind, because I'll be throwing a challenge to you guys and to all of us on how to make things work. So it is a great honor for me to be speaking on behalf of the African Court, and I bring you warm greetings from the President of the Court to this forum. We gather under the very inspiring theme of reimagining global governance, Africa and a world in transition. Within this broad theme, I've been asked to speak to you, or should I say to present a solidarity statement on the topic advancing justice, accountability, and citizen access to the African human rights system. Dear colleagues, dear friends, over the past 4 decades, Africa has built one of the world's most innovative regional human rights systems. From the adoption of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights in 1981 to the operationalization of the African Court in 2006, our continent has sought to transform its historical experiences shaped by colonialism, the slave trade, apartheid, liberation struggles, and reconstruction into a distinctive, progressive, and inclusive vision of rights. Yet, the world around us has changed dramatically since the adoption of the African Charter. The international human rights landscape is undergoing significant transformation. Long established assumptions about international cooperation and global governance are being questioned. The post-Cold War optimism that once underpinned the universality and progressive development of human rights norms is increasingly challenged by shifting geopolitical alignments, the emergence of a multipolar world, declining confidence in multilateralism, and growing contestation over the authority of international law. These developments, dear colleagues, are reshaping not only global governance, but also the normative environment within which regional human rights systems operate. As the Prime Minister of Greece said, a new global order is on the rise. Multilateralism is under strain, and fundamental tenets of the post-1945 world are being questioned. He went on to say, might override risk once again becoming the norm in international relations. Similarly, the Prime Minister of Canada, during his Davos speech in 2026, remarked that there is a rupture in the world order the end of a pleasant fiction and the beginning of a harsh reality where geopolitics among the great powers is no longer constrained. And he warned us that middle powers must act together, because if we are not on the table, we are on the menu. I repeat that again. Middle powers must act together, because if we are not on the table, we are on the menu. We therefore meet, my dear friends and colleagues, at a defining moment in history. In several African states, civic space is shrinking. Constitutionalism is under pressure. Democratic institutions face increasing strain, and human rights defenders continue to encounter significant obstacles in carrying out their work. These realities remind us that the protection of human rights can never be taken for granted. It requires constant vigilance, courageous leadership, independent institutions, and an active citizen participation. The aspiration of a just, peaceful, and prosperous Africa is not new to us. It is captured with remarkable clarity in Agenda 2063, our shared continental blueprint for transformation, and in the inspiring vision of the Africa we want. That vision envisages an Africa whose development is people-centered, where democratic values are firmly entrenched, where justice prevails over impunity, where institutions serve the public interest, and where every woman, every man, and every child lives in dignity, equality, and freedom. At the heart of that vision lies a fundamental truth, which is that citizens are not passive beneficiaries of governance. They are its architect, custodian, and ultimate source of legitimacy. The African human rights system was created precisely to serve those citizens. Yet, we must also acknowledge with honesty and resolve that the African human rights system continues to face significant challenges that affect both its accessibility and its effectiveness. The African Court on Human and People's Rights, for example, was established to provide an independent judicial mechanism through which justice could be obtained when domestic remedies prove unavailable or ineffective. However, access to that justice has become increasingly constrained. The non-deposit and withdrawal by several state parties of the declaration under Article 34.6 of the protocol has significantly reduced the ability of individuals and non-governmental organizations to bring cases directly before the court. Equally concerning is a relatively low level of ratification of the protocol, as at today, more than 2 decades after its adoption, only 34 of the 55 AU member states have ratified the protocol. Dear friends, dear colleagues, excellencies, advancing justice, accountability, and citizen access to the African human rights system requires member states to honor the obligations they have voluntarily undertaken under international human rights instruments, including the obligation to implement decisions of African Union human rights bodies. The record in this regard, unfortunately, is a matter of serious concern. Since becoming operational in 2006, I want to give you some statistics now. The African Court has received 359 cases, of which 259 have been finalized, involving 21 member states. Although the court's jurisprudence has made a significant contribution to the development of African human rights law, its effectiveness ultimately depends not only on the quality of its judgment, but on their faithful implementation. Of the 259 finalized cases, approximately 60% did not result in findings of violation. In the remaining 40%, the court found violations against 10 African Union member states and ordered reparations. To date, only one country has fully complied with the court's judgment. The overall level of compliance, therefore, remains extremely low, less than 10%. A judgment, dear friends, that is not implemented cannot fully restore violated rights, cannot provide effective remedies to victims, or contribute to lasting institutional reform. Continued delays or failures in implementation diminishes public confidence in regional justice and weakens our collective commitment to the rule of law. Excellencies, dear friends, this year, our gathering carries a particular significance as we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the operationalization of the African Court. For 2 decades, the court has stood as one of Africa's foremost guardians of justice. Through its jurisprudence, it has strengthened the rule of law, advanced democratic governance, protected fundamental freedoms, and given practical meaning to the rights guaranteed under the African Charter and other human rights instruments. Beyond the judgment it has delivered, the court has demonstrated something even more profound, that Africa possesses institutions capable of interpreting and enforcing international human rights standards in ways that are responsive to the continent's realities, aspirations, and values. As we celebrate this milestone, we should also recognize that the success of the African Court, and indeed the success of the entire African human rights system, cannot be measured solely by the number of cases decided or judgments delivered. Its true success will ultimately be measured by the confidence that ordinary Africans place in these institutions, by whether those institutions remain genuinely accessible, by whether their decisions are respected and implemented, and by whether citizens continue to believe that justice can be obtained beyond national borders when domestic remedies fail. We must therefore ask ourselves some fundamental and pointing questions. Do young people seated behind there know that these institutions exist? Do women in rural communities know where they can seek protection when their rights are violated? Do persons with disabilities, internally displaced persons, refugees, journalists, human rights defenders, and marginalized communities know that continental institutions exist to protect their rights? Can ordinary citizens access these institutions without insurmountable legal, financial, linguistic, and procedural barriers? These are the questions that must guide our collective thinking. As often stated in the African human rights advocacy, the African human rights system only becomes real when ordinary citizens can knock on its door. Rights that cannot be accessed remain promises unfulfilled. Institutions that remain invisible to the people they were created to serve cannot fully realize their transformative potential. This is why the role of civil society has never been more important. As Africa navigates an increasingly complex global environment, civil society must continue to ensure that the continent's voice remains firmly rooted in the lived experiences and aspirations of its people. A vibrant civic space promotes participation, strengthens accountability, supports victims of human rights violation, and enriches democratic discourse. Civil society must reimagine not only the African human rights system, but the African court. We must reimagine an African court not as a court of last resort for states, but as a first refuge for citizens, as a court for the people and not just about the people, not as a distant court in Arusha, but as a home where every ordinary African can seek justice and be heard. The African human rights system should therefore never be viewed as a distant legal framework reserved for lawyers, judges, and the academics. It belongs to every African citizen. It belongs to the farmer seeking protection against unlawful displacement. It belongs to the child whose right to education must be respected. It belongs to the woman demanding equality and freedom from violence. It belongs to the young entrepreneur seeking fair opportunities. It belongs to the journalist defending freedom of expression. It belongs to persons with disabilities seeking equal participation. It belongs to communities striving to protect their land, environment, and cultural heritage. In short, it belongs to all of us. Civil society must therefore reimagine the African human rights system and an African court and make it accessible to the youth, credible to states, usable by lawyers, and accountable to citizens. Our collective responsibility is therefore clear. We must encourage member states that have not already done so to ratify the protocol establishing the court, maintain, or where appropriate, restore access to individuals and NGOs under Article 34.6, cooperate fully with the court through its proceedings, and implement its judgments promptly and in good faith. Above all, we must cultivate a new generation of Africans who see human rights not as abstract ideals, but as practical instruments for advancing justice, sustainable development, peace, and shared prosperity. That is the promise of Agenda 2063. That is the meaning of the Africa we want. Let this forum inspire stronger partnership among governments, continental institutions, civil society, and citizens. Let it strengthen the bridge between citizens and the institutions created to serve them. Let it renew our common resolve that justice in Africa should never depend upon wealth, geography, language, status, or circumstance. Together, let us build an Africa where every citizen knows and can claim their rights. After this forum, let us make the new chapter of the African human rights system one of renewed commitment, a chapter in which access to justice is expanded rather than restricted, a chapter in which compliance with judicial decisions becomes the norm rather than the exception, a chapter in which civic space is protected rather than diminished, Let us build an Africa where every institution earns the confidence of its people. An Africa where accountability is embraced as a cornerstone of democratic governance. An Africa where justice is accessible, visible, and transformative. An Africa where human dignity is protected not only by law, but through our collective action. An Africa that speaks with confidence in shaping the future of global governance because it has first built strong, trusted, and people-centered institutions at home. That is the Africa we owe future generations. That is the Africa we want. I wish the 2026 ECOSOC Citizens Forum every success. The African Court reaffirms its unwavering solidarity with ECOSOC, civil society, member states, and all Africans working tirelessly to advance justice, accountability, and meaningful citizen access to the African human rights system. Long live ECOSOC, long live the African Court, long live the African Union, long live Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ino. It's a solidarity statement, and we'll try to publish this statement on our socials so just a quick question for our friends who are at the back. How many of you are studying law or you intend to study law at the back? No one studying law or you intend to study law? Okay, so if you are in this field, so make sure tomorrow you try to catch up with Dr. Ino. So this is one of the most important organs of the African Union, the African Court. So try to meet him tomorrow. I was joking. It's not the end for everyone. But for our colleagues who are the local participants, basically you can take leave. Our international delegates, especially those who are staying at Best Western, will have a small briefing, and then we have another meeting continuing in the room opposite. So that is still a long way for you to go. But with these few words, before we conclude, I just wanted to say thank you to someone very special. He doesn't know I'm calling his name, but Victor Adu, just stand up. Victor Adu keeps traveling wherever ECOSOC goes, taking photos for us, that too on a pro bono basis. So this is the true spirit of Pan-Africanism. So Victor, we thank you. Thank you so much for all those nice photos that you have been taking for us. I know I've been receiving mails. You want to get your photos, we'll send you the link later on. So the photos have been posted on our socials, but I have the listserv. We have the listserv for everyone. So later on, we'll share the link. You can download the photos you want. If you want to download my photo also, you can download, no worries. So with these few words, we wish you a very pleasant evening, but please join us very early tomorrow morning so that we can conclude the Citizens Forum on time. And again, I'm saying for all our international participants, delegates, you please stay with us. We have a small briefing and then we'll have another meeting continuing tonight. So for all delegates, please, you can take leave, especially our friends, the locals ones, late. So please take leave and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Cheers.